Staff ready?
I believe we're ready to go.
Council ready? CNET ready? Excellent. Good evening, all. We will call to order this Thursday, April 7th, 2022 regular meeting of the College Township Council to order. I invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, welcome. I will advise that the council met in executive session with regard to a personnel matter just prior to this meeting. At this point, I will open it up for public open discussion. This would be for anything that anyone wishes to speak with council about that is not on this evening's agenda.
Sue has her hand raised there.
Sue, fire away.
Is the
Mute.
owl turned on? Oh, yeah, wait, check.
Hold on, Sue.
Sorry, Sue, we're having an audio issue here in the room. 1 second.
I think she muted.
Go ahead and try something, Sue.
Oh, you're muted.
Hold on, Sue. I'm seeing a red light on the owl on
Oh,
this
yeah.
side.
The volume up.
That has something to do with it. Okay, Sue, try again, please.
Okay, I
Thank
can hear you.
We can hear
Can you hear
you.
me?
We can hear you. Thank you.
That better?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, just a quick question. I've been noticing in the paper that Ferguson Township, Patton, and the borough are working on single-use plastics, and I wondered if that's being discussed anywhere and who will be discussing it at College Township. Thank you.
The only thing I would answer, it is not currently being discussed. I do know that a Pennsylvania law student has been soliciting comments, and they'll be reporting back to one of the COG committees, is that? Or is it? Yes, I think it is Climate Action, yeah. Yeah, they'll be reporting back to the Climate Action Committee on that subject. So we're waiting.
Now, I had a call from, I had a call from that person, an email from that person, and I didn't even, I said, I live in College Township and they're not doing anything, but
Yeah.
he still was interested, so it must be
Right.
legitimate.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're assembling the comments and thoughts and everything, and then that's supposed to get reported back, and then we'll see what that all says, and then
Good.
decide
Okay,
if we want to
thank you
move
very
forward.
much.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else have, yes, Kathy, please.
Good evening, I'm Kathy Madison, I'm a College Township resident, but I'm here as the chairperson of the Center Region Parks and Recreation Authority. I have some great news to share with you, and an invitation. After 14 long years, we're having a groundbreaking at Whitehall Road Regional Park.
Yeah.
It'll be April 27th, it's Wednesday, at 2:30 in the afternoon. You all will get an official invitation, but I wanted to come here in person to tell you, because it's very exciting news, and all of you played a huge part in getting us to where we are today. And I just want to say thank you again, and I hope to see you on the 27th in my hard hat and with my gold shovel.
Good for you.
Looking forward to
Excellent.
it. Thank you.
And also, I have the pleasure of serving with Kathy on the Parks Governance Committee, and we'll be meeting that morning and talking parks. So it's just about appropriate there,
Right.
so
Very good. Okay, thank you very much.
thank you.
Okay, good night.
Anybody else have anything to discuss with council that isn't on this evening's agenda? Seeing nor hearing none. Next item is whether any of the members of council have a new agenda item to add to this evening's agenda. Seeing or hearing none, we move on to plans. P1, Penn State University Beaver Stadium Gate C Preliminary Final Land Development Plan, University Park Campus. Is Dawn beginning the discussion?
Actually, it's gonna be
Lindsay,
Lindsay. Dawn
okay.
is not with us this evening, but Lindsay is doing us a favor by pinch hitting.
All right.
All right, thank you. So we're gonna start, we have 3 plans tonight. We're gonna start with Beaver Stadium, and I put together a PowerPoint just to kind of lead us through the basics of each one of these plans. So, Gate C Plaza expansion. This project is the expansion and adjustment of pedestrian facilities at Gate C of Beaver Stadium. The project is being undertaken to improve pedestrian movement at Gate C and to improve safety for pedestrians. There will be a slight increase in impervious coverage and associated increase in stormwater runoff. This is being addressed with a detention facility. At the 2 meetings ago, the Planning Commission voted to recommend approval of this plan. So this is existing conditions, and you can see there, this is the hatched area is the demolition area, and this is Gate C. There are 2 little parts to this plan. And if you look here, if the sidewalk, whoops, I pushed the wrong button. The sidewalk here is new, and then if the screen were a little bit clearer, you would be able to see that the expansion comes the whole way out here and around. So you can see with existing, oh gosh, sorry, wrong button again. You can see with existing, boy, Lindsay.
Where is it going?
I don't know.
I
It went real-
don't know what's.
Yeah, can you go back to that, maybe it was the 4th slide. I apologize. But you can see a little bit better on the plans that you probably have in your iPad where the expansion is. So with that, they also are,
This one?
yep, keep going. 1, 2, one more.
One more?
Yeah. They're also grading an area at the, go ahead, Jen, one more.
Oh,
At the
sorry.
Mound site?
Yeah, the Mound site, so
We're
here
on
it is.
border.
This is existing conditions at the Mound site, and then the next slide will show you the grading that they're doing, just for pedestrian safety and to help people not be able to have to hike up that big mound. So, this is Beaver Stadium. As I said, the Planning Commission recommended approval, so this is, I'll turn it back over to you.
Lindsay, who's here to represent?
Thanks. Michael Veo is here from Stahl Schaefer Engineers, the engineer, if you have any questions, or project manager.
Thanks. Michael, anything you want to add to what Lindsay shared with us?
No, just, I'm here to answer questions.
Excellent, excellent. Council, questions for staff for the design professional? Eric, I'll go ahead and start with you.
I support this. I just was curious. I think Lindsay said access, the PowerPoint said safety. I imagine it's a combination of the two. It's a bottleneck and you're trying to widen it.
That's correct.
Get more people on a flat surface, not spilling over the,
That's correct.
okay.
It's more access, but there is a safety component, especially on the mountain side on Border Road.
That's all I had.
Great. Paul?
No,
Carlo?
No,
Dustin?
no questions.
Wow, we're being really easy on you.
but we did see this.
We did.
We
Yeah,
did,
we have
I'm just
seen-
kidding. So,
So the
the
public
only
knows.
question I would have, so we're always sensitive, we're taking out trees.
We are.
Are we putting any trees back in?
Penn State's gonna look at that after the season, and adjust where they're planning on replanting the 19 trees they're taking out based on pedestrian traffic and security concerns.
Okay. You're gonna follow the goat paths and go from there? Okay, got it. If there's no questions or concerns, I will gladly accept a motion to approve. Staff has provided one in our cover memo.
Mr. Chair, I so move to approve P1 as outlined in the agenda.
I have a motion.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and second. Any further discussion? Any hands in the public there, Jen?
Nope.
Okay, great. Very good. Call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Continuing on, P2, Spring Creek Presbyterian Church Subdivision 144 and 150 Mary Street, Lamont.
All right, thank you. So this is a 2-lot subdivision at the Presbyterian church property in Lamont. The parsonage will be split off of the main church property. The only actual land development part of this, well, this is the overview slide, I forgot
You
about.
want me to keep going?
No, this one's
Oh,
fine.
okay.
So the owner, Spring Creek Presbyterian Church in Lamont, 2-lot subdivision. You can see the property is here, and the parsonage, and they are splitting that off. The property is located on Mary Street, Berry Street, and Mulberry Lane. The developer has requested a waiver for sidewalks, and staff is recommending that waiver. The planning commission, though, voted 4-2 for the waiver, or to recommend the plan. The vote was 4-2. Prior to this plan being submitted, there was a zoning hearing, and they requested 10 variances to be able to have this put onto the property, and the zoning hearing board was willing and granted those 10 variances, mostly setbacks and coverage. I can get into more detail there if you like, but as I was saying, the only land development part is here down in the pinkish area. That is a 3-lot parking lot that's going to be expanded, and the yellow boxes
Sorry.
represent, oh, that's
Sorry,
okay.
Sorry.
That's fine.
Very temperamental.
Sure is. So this is proposed Lot 1R, and then over here is proposed Lot 2. And I did put together, or Don put together a memo with a recommended motion if council is so willing. And Lee Slusser is here representing the applicant, and he's from Pantera. So if you have any further questions for him. Also, there are additional slides if anyone wants to look over the request for waivers for sidewalks.
Great. Questions for staff or the design professionals? Paul, anything?
Yeah, real quick question. You mentioned putting in a 3-spot parking lot there. What are the plans for the rest of the lot? Is there a plan to
Lee,
demolish?
if you would, please.
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, they need off-site parking for that house, and then they're gonna rehabilitate the house. But that wouldn't be granted.
Is it currently occupied?
No.
No? Okay. And are they thinking single-family home or apartments or?
Single-family home.
Okay, with 3. And then the existing parking lot between that and behind the church, that's going to remain, no modifications elsewhere on the property, is that correct? Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
I think there's a section of fence moving. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yep, great. Does that help, Paul?
that's all for me.
Carla?
Yeah, does the addition of the 3-spot parking, if it were still one whole piece of property, does the addition of the parking spots, is it still in compliance for impervious?
I'll let you answer that.
This particular lot was about as non-conforming as you could get, and just about
So it
every
already
manner
wasn't
there
in
is.
compliance for much of anything?
Yes, and
Okay, that's
this,
fair.
this subdivision does help make the newly created lot as close to compliant as possible.
But still not with the 3 parking spots?
It's good with impervious.
With impervious, that's what I'm asking
It
about.
meets the
The
impervious.
church, is the church built a million years ago? I get
Yes.
it, okay. Okay, that helps me wrap my brain around it, thanks.
Okay. Is that it?
Mhm.
Dustin, anything?
Yeah, just to wrap my brain further around it, I think you flashed just some pictures.
Want me to go
Yeah.
forward, Lynn?
Sure, go ahead, Jen. Yes.
For the
Do we have
waiver.
pictures of the
for
lot, the parking proposed, where the lot would go?
Oh, if you can go back to, I think 2 slides, Jen. There's an aerial there, and so the parking would be over in here. And there's an access. Lee, maybe you can speak more to how the church will continue to be accessed and how the driveway will be accessed.
So if I'm standing on Mary Street, can you point to Mary? That's Mary, right? Up and down where the line's at.
Yeah.
Why we got,
Sorry, that was me.
Laser.
I'm letting Lee do it.
Star Wars just broke out.
So Mary has the line on it, right? And so then if I face the house, the lot would be just lower, right? If you went on the other side of the house, the 3 parking lot would be, or if I'm standing on Barry, it's gonna be on my left, right? Yep.
Right there.
Okay,
Yep.
right there. All right, and that's really just expanding the existing parking that's there, right?
There's
Sort of.
existing parking's down here between the church and the
okay.
parsonage. New parking.
So it's a relocation of the parking? Best?
It'll be, yeah, this parking's for the single-family house.
Right.
So, I mean, this house, once it's broken away from the church, will need its own parking, that'll be here. And the church parking will continue to be there on the same lot as the church.
Okay, that's interesting, because I think those people just park alongside the road most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Right in front of the house, okay.
The update,
Clean that.
the subdivision requires them to come into compliance with zoning, so that's where the parking standards come in.
You can actually see that on page 5 of 6 on our handout, where the car is currently on the side of the street.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that it, Dustin?
That's it?
Eric?
Yeah, what was the issue that prevented the planning commission from voting unanimously to support the plan as?
Sidewalks.
Was the sidewalk waiver?
Yeah, they voted, 2 didn't agree with the sidewalk waiver, and therefore they didn't vote for the plan.
So the 2 no votes were, they would have voted for the plan if the sidewalk waiver wasn't
Yes,
part of it?
yeah, it was just simply sidewalks that they,
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to sound insensitive to the sidewalk waiver, but I think it's a little bit different of a situation. If that's the only issue they were hung up on, I guess I feel a little better about the 4-2 vote. The variance process, just a little clarification. Were all 10 variances asked for and granted?
Yes.
I mean, in order for the subdivided lot to actually, you be able to do anything with it?
yes.
Yes, in general, it would become less non-conforming with the 10 variances,
Right, the remaining large lot or the small lot?
both.
Both.
Well, yeah, was my concern, because if you subdivide off a lot that little, you're gonna sell it, but what can you do with it? So the only reason they can sell it then is because of the variances that were granted. The only reason somebody would buy it is because of the variances.
Right.
Well, because of the subdivision.
Yes.
Well, yeah, first you
can
subdivide.
buy a
But
property
without the
out.
variances, it's really not marketable, is it? For anything?
Well, without the variances, they can't subdivide it. I think.
Or develop,
Yeah.
Yeah, which came first?
So.
You couldn't do the subdivision without the variances being
And at the
granted.
same time, then, it also allowed it to be potentially marketable as something you could sell because you could do something with it,
Yes.
as opposed to just saying, I own this lot.
Well, but the parsonage is on it.
You could
There
stay
is a
that-
structure on it.
Right, that's grandfathered in.
Right,
So somebody would
non-conforming,
buy it
yep.
and use it as a parsonage, okay? It's more about me understanding how this process work, because it seems counterintuitive that you would grant variances ahead of somebody coming in for a subdivision. But in this case, without them, we couldn't have even considered it.
that's correct.
And as a bonus, with them, there's a bit more flexibility now on the parcel they want to sell.
Yes.
It's all good for the church.
And it's less non-conforming.
And
Yeah,
then we get that bonus in the sense that we take care of some nonconformities,
Yes.
mostly through.
Both lots are still non-conforming in different manners, but the newly created lot, the non-conformities are drastically reduced. And it does, actually brings parts of that lot into conformance that wouldn't have been if it were still part of the whole.
And just to add, these variances don't allow them to do anything with, I don't don't think they could tear the parsonage down, for instance, and build a new, or could they?
Yeah.
They could build in that same
In that
footprint.
Same
footprint?
In that
Same
footprint.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah, but they can't add a garage or something like that.
No.
Okay. You didn't have to be involved in this discussion, so I appreciate your patience.
It's complex.
But it helps me understand before I vote yes, what all happened, so.
It's complex, particularly when you get into the variance, that your zoning hearing board solicitor did a marvelous job with that one. It was very complicated.
No, I'm good.
You're good? Okay. The only things I had, one, Mark, Mr. Toretti, bad news for you. Lee has set the standard for, the initial standard for a waiver request. Now, he did throw in at the bottom a difficult and expensive, that I did not see anywhere sidewalk to nowhere, or less trafficked sidewalk, I think is what you coined and everything. But that's still, the waiver request was very helpful. Thank you very much. And you substantiated, like I said, other than the difficult and expensive, that we hear that one all the time, and everything, so.
Hey, just quit writing that, because it means nothing to us.
Yeah.
It usually means a sidewalk.
Yeah. They call it a sidewalk.
They call it the cost of development. I mean,
Right. We kind of react the opposite way to that. The other thing I will point out, that this could have been a potential opportunity for fee and lieu in it as well. So, hint,
Getting
hint,
there.
hint, and everything. But that's all I had in it. I know I support the recommendation from staff and planning commission. So if the fellow members of council feel the same, I'll accept the motion.
There is one.
Oh, I'm
comment.
sorry,
Sue
please.
Smith.
Well,
Sue
okay,
Smith.
hold on,
When
Sue,
you're ready
hold
for
on,
that.
Sue.
Yeah.
Hold on, Sue.
Oh, are you
No, go ahead. Let's get it.
gonna, okay.
Hold on, Sue. I'll accept the motion, and
I'll move to approve the Spring Creek Presbyterian Church subdivision plan dated February 21st, 2022, and last revised March 10th, 2022, subject to the following conditions. I am
Second.
gonna make a decision about sidewalks on this.
Yep.
Okay. One, within 90 days from the date of approval by council, all conditions must be finalized and signatures and all of that good stuff. 2, pay outstanding review fees. 3, post surety as approved by the township engineer. 4, fully comply with College Township Code Section 180-12 of the township ordinance. 5, address to the satisfaction of the township engineer any outstanding comments. 6, approve a waiver request for the installation of sidewalks.
thank you. I have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a second. Council, any other comments? Okay, Sue, go ahead, please.
Just wanted to check and see if anyone, looked at the Lamont Historic District? Whether this property is in the historic district?
It is in the historic district. It's a contributing structure to that historic district.
I'm sorry?
It is in the historic district, and it is a contributing structure to that historic district.
Right, that's what I thought. I just hope that's being considered. Thank you.
Yes, I believe that factored into staff's assessment as well as planning commission's review.
It was fresh in our minds,
Yep.
so we knew.
Yep. Yeah, very fresh, yes,
Yes.
very good. Anyone else, Jen? No? Okay, call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item, Jake's Fireworks Preliminary Final Land Development Plan, corner of College Avenue and Pike Street. Lindsay's up again.
Thank you. So this is a development of the former Sheets property at the corner of Pike Street and East College Avenue. The total property size is 1.3 acres and zoned general commercial. The existing use currently is the storage and sales of landscaping material. The proposed use is commercial retail sales of fireworks. The maximum building coverage is 30%. They're currently at 8.5%. The plan was submitted in February 22nd, and the deadline is May 23rd. Required parking spaces are 20, proposed parking spaces are 20, and sidewalks are proposed as required. This plan was presented to council as a sketch plan back in November of 2021.
I don't know what happened, sorry, Lynn.
It's okay. Jake's Fireworks will be a year-round, 5,000 square foot retail store with 20 parking spaces. The plan includes sidewalks around the perimeter at College Avenue and Pike Street, as well as interior sidewalks. Stormwater is being assessed or addressed at an existing detention basin. The Planning Commission voted to approve the plan with a request they consider moving the dumpster area, which is currently out front. If I can spot it here. Oh, next slide, yeah, that's why I couldn't spot it. And the dumpster's here. So the Planning Commission requested that they look into it, and as a result, in the plan response comments from Mr. Toretti, they did investigate, and there are some overhead power lines that made that not feasible, since the trucks would be coming in and may hit the power lines overhead, preventing them from relocating.
Good job thinking about that.
There's the access is from Pike Street in and out, and then there is a right in, right out on East College Avenue. And again, I've prepared the motion sheet for you if you're so inclined, and Mr. Toretti is here if you have any questions representing Jake's Fireworks, and he's with Pantera.
Great. Just for a procedural note, in our agenda, there's 8 items listed. Number 7, we just discussed it with regard to the dumpster. But end of the day, we don't control where we can't say in absolution, you need to have your dumpster here, right?
Yeah.
It's a recommendation, but.
I did leave that in there just so you would be aware
Sure.
of what the Planning
No,
Commission
appreciate
did
it. Just
recommend.
making, in case somebody was reading this. And then, could you help me understand the remove white lines from the yellow crosshatch, what that is
Yeah,
intended to mean?
So their parking spaces, they have 20 spaces, 20 per required. This area here is hatched off as no parking.
Overflow, yeah.
And so they will, it was hatched and then it was also striped, because they thought that in cases where the weeks prior to 4th of July or any other fireworks holiday, that people would need that parking. So the 20 is the maximum required by ordinance. That's why we asked them to take away the striping, so people wouldn't think that those are spaces they could use every day.
Full-time, yeah.
Yes.
24/7,
Yeah.
365. Yeah,
So
right.
we discussed it at the Planning Commission level and at staff level, and when those dates come, when people are overflowing the parking, they can just put a sign there saying parking.
Illegally park like they normally do.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's really not a condition, that's just an understanding? or-
Yeah, and they did it.
Okay,
So
great.
that's
So that
probably
could be-
another one you can,
Okay,
Yeah.
very good. Carla, questions for staff or the design professional?
Yeah, so thanks. The sidewalks are existing, correct? No.
Some of them, yeah.
Some of them internally in the site are, but all this around
Okay,
here is being proposed.
thank you. Does
And then
it,
out- And then also out from here, out to the street, that's being proposed too.
okay, thank you. So my follow-up question is, was there discussion with staff about having a curb at the sidewalk go to the, does it go to the curb? Is there a curb?
There
For
is a
crossing?
curb. There's here, right here's a crossing.
No, sorry. At the corner for crossing College Ave.
Yeah, there's already a.
There,
Spur.
that's where the
We're
curb
tying
cut
into
is,
that.
okay.
Yeah, there's already.
And it's
a-
connecting to that.
Yeah.
Great, okay. That's my big question.
Is that it?
Yep.
Dustin, anything?
So, on the sidewalk question, does the lot extend the whole way against Lime Rock Terrace?
I'm sorry, yes, it does.
So what's the requirement for sidewalks along that road?
Nope.
I believe there's an existing sidewalk there,
Is there?
up to Lime Rock, right?
Up to Lime Rock,
Lime Rock, yeah.
Lime Rock, it's a cliff.
Yeah, it's a cliff. And
Well, there's that.
The Sky Bridge?
There's a guide rail there. We just followed, there was a previous plan before ours for a car wash
that was submitted.
That's a good question,
And
though.
we just, for the sidewalks, we just followed what was shown and approved on that plan. But yeah, there's basically a guide rail right off of the road, and then it drops off down in there. So
Yeah,
it would be
yeah.
feasible to.
So there's not enough space for a sidewalk, what you're saying?
Yeah.
So you're planning on
That's a good
keeping the
point.
existing retaining wall that's right there?
Part of it, we are, but the existing wall comes here and cuts through here, and even a little bit here where we're putting a new section on at this corner of the building. And this corner of the building is just a little bit too close to the existing wall, where the building footing would probably be up against the wall, so we do a little section there, the new retaining wall also.
Just a question.
Cool. Eric, anything?
Yeah, I want to go back to a comment I made during the sketch plan. I want to at least have a brief discussion about it. I don't know that it's going to affect this plan. But the right in, right out is the way it's designed doesn't prevent people from making left turns off College Avenue into the site. We saw that with Sheets. We have
But you can't, because there's a median there.
It has a raised median.
It does have a raised median?
Yes, it
Did
does.
that raised median go in after that was a Sheets and a Mike's video, or has it always been there?
It's been there. The other problem we were having was at the Benner Pike sheets further up by the mall.
Oh, yeah.
by Stockbridge.
Yeah.
That's
That's
where-
Oh, that happens all the time, yeah.
I just want to make sure we don't create another one of
Right.
those
No.
situations. So if this becomes a Starbucks in 5 years and we pick up the same level of traffic we have at Sheets, at Shiloh, we're not going to have people making left turns from College Avenue on there.
If you're
Only
in
if it's a
a,
Chick-fil-A.
if you're in a 4x4 truck or something with substantial ground clearance, possibly.
Mark, that was easy.
Okay.
Is that it, Eric? Paul, anything?
Yes, thank you. I remember going back to the sketch plan, we were suggesting 2 potential locations for the dumpster.
Yeah.
Can you, if I'm not mistaken, the one that you evaluated was in the upper right,
Yes.
and that's where the overhead line is, right?
There's a couple overhead lines in there, yes,
Yeah.
and that was the place where we were trying to put it at, tuck it back behind.
What about in the lower left? That corner down there, we also talked about that one during the sketch plan as well.
Really having it, I think, having it right by the entrance, coming in, I didn't want to have, as far as, this is really going to be the main entrance, based upon even from the sheet store, and having it right there, I wasn't crazy about. I have it, like I said, out here, it's going to be a lot easier accessible for the truck to pull in, back out, and then go out. And what we did do is, besides just having, basically there'll be a vinyl fence that'll be around it, then we have some landscaping around that. We also just updated the gate detail, so the gate detail matches the vinyl fence. It's not gonna be a chain link fence with slats in it. So we try to make it as nice as possible, knowing the situation of where it's at on there. But I didn't wanna have it right, as soon as you come into the site, it's right there, first thing you see.
I mean, Eric and I both remembered the same thing, that's where the sheets had it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Right? And so was the objection logistical or preferential? Because I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of having it right out in front of the place. And
Yeah.
I really can't imagine that Jake's is thrilled with that either. I mean, I'd be surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, as people are driving along College Avenue, I'm kind of surprised you also think that Pike Street is the main entrance. I think it's gonna be the right in, once people pass, they're coming from the highway, right? They're gonna come in and they're gonna drive past Pike Street and make that right turn. That, in my mind, is the main entrance, the right in.
Back from the Sheets days, I mean, and it's not gonna have Sheets type traffic, I don't think. Both absolutely got used hard, and everything, but with that said, Sheets was able to make it work with it, even with all their traffic, having it in there. At the end of the day.
24/7.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's their, the property owner's prerogative. I think we've made it clear. I think if you wanted to come back and move that,
Yeah.
we would be very receptive.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
if it's feasible, we'll check into it, but I mean,
Yeah, I wanted to revisit that we had the conversation, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly, about both locations.
Yeah.
And there are no overhead line issues in the one on the lower left, so
Right.
I just wanted to clarify. what
But
that-
also, keep in mind, which if I recall, dumpster requirements from when Sheets was there, they're also at least over twice the size now for a dumpster pad. Now we have 2 dumpsters and recycling things, it's about 23, 24 feet wide. Sheets had a little 10-foot wide
Yeah.
dumpster. And any more of the center region, it's a lot bigger thing to try to fit back in there.
May I also ask then, if, let's say theoretically you did move that dumpster, would that create 2 more parking spots right up front?
If anything, probably lose some.
You wouldn't?
Just in there. I mean, it's like I said, I looked at it, I was excited whenever, I talked to Mark about setbacks and trying to put it here, and I thought I had a layout, but then I started looking and saw that the existing overhead lines, because ideally, I would love to put it back here, and that just shot it down. And, over here, with that size of dumpster, like I said, it's twice the size of what Sheets had, it's gonna be very difficult to fit in there, and, and without blocking the access.
Okay, so with it there, that line of trees ends at the corner of the dumpster, right?
But then there's some shrubs, I think they're bayberry, which they grow about 6 to 8 feet high.
So they'll screen, partially
Yeah,
screen
at the
that?
corners, I have them, pretty much I have them at the corners there, the 2 corners, just, not as a complete screen, but you get to see some of the fence, but not all of it.
It's, mainly it's an aesthetic thing, that, driving down, that's the corridor, right? We've been talking about
Yeah.
this is the gateway to College Township. I just want it to look nice,
Yeah.
if we can. Go ahead, Adam. Answer my
They
question.
can't say it, but I can. I think that stinks. I don't like it there.
Yeah, Yeah.
Again, I understand that,
Yeah.
design prerogative.
If you'd always put a 10-foot dumpster in, we can 10-foot wide and that's it.
I understand, I understand.
I know.
But I would strongly, I agree with Paul, I strongly would encourage you to do everything that you can
Yeah.
to consider getting it out of there.
Sure, and this is a commercial one, so you're subject to, you pick your hauler and pick your dumpster. It's not like in the borough of State College where
Yeah.
you can only use their dumpster,
Yeah.
their manufacturer and stuff. So you might have some, I don't know what their waste generation counts are gonna be and everything like that, but you might have some opportunities for smaller, and in particular, going back to the overflow, the overhead lines are only really an issue if have a overhead emptying dumpster,
Yeah.
as opposed to,
Pull it out.
the back, that connects onto the back.
Yeah,
and
you
everything.
need the smaller.
Yeah,
things.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yep,
Exactly,
yep.
because I was actually watching.
Yeah,
YouTube
so
videos of
and plus
dumpsters.
you're gonna pay for a bigger dumpster, and if you don't wanna pay for more of a dumpster than you do. But again, if you and your client come back and wanna move that, you will find a very welcome audience
Okay.
here, to do it. We have nothing to hit you over the head with it, but I think you're hearing pretty clear that, it could be better.
Yes, I mean, I know, it was something that's talked about at the sketch plan, and like I said, I tried to upgrade it some with the materials and that, but, and.
End of the day, it's a dumpster.
Yeah.
It's a dumpster fence right in front of the main doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but with that said, again, that's, all we can do is highly suggest, and everything.
If I could pile on a little bit here.
Sure.
If you did swap locations, Mark,
Yeah.
it does appear that you would trade overflow parking. That could become
Yeah.
the overflow parking you lose. And it seems like the overflow parking would be more attractive in a more attractive location, so just more piling on.
Yeah.
Yep. Anybody else want to pile on?
Lindsay has her hand up.
Lindsay,
I
please.
And I just want to bring, this came up, discussions between Mark and I and some other staff members, but as we move forward with maybe some more form-based zoning, there are some requirements where the parking has to be in the back in the building out front, so you're looking at the front of the building and not the parking area in a dumpster. So as we move forward with these changes, that might be something that we can
That's
start
actually
to implement.
my first thought when I looked at this was
Yeah, put the
parking
building
should be
right
in the
where it
back.
was before. Yep.
Yeah.
And if I might just finish my thought.
Yep.
That, we've been talking about that corridor as being an
Absolutely.
important part, and that's, just that on the corner just doesn't seem like a very inviting look.
I'll quote our manager that I think this is probably an improvement over
Oh.
current,
There's no doubt of that.
Agreed.
with or without the dumpster is, yeah, so.
That's all I had, Mr. Chair. Thank
All
you. I
right,
just
great.
really wanted to raise that concern.
So, with that said, reluctantly, without a dumpster requirement, we do have a motion before us in the cover memo if we're comfortable making it.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the preliminary final land development plan for Jake's Fireworks dated February 21st, 2022, last revised March 23rd, 2022, subject to the following 6 conditions. Within the 90 days from the date of approval by council, all conditions must be satisfied, final signatures must be obtained, and the plan must be recorded with the Center County Recorder of Deeds Office. Failure to meet the 90 days recordation time requirement will render the plan null and void. Isn't that kind of understood? Or, all right.
If you
We're
don't,
working on getting it shortened.
yeah.
So part of the,
But I mean, that's going to happen.
Look, we got fully comply with College Township Code Section 180-12. That's
All
a,
right,
that.
sorry.
Yeah.
Number 2, pay all outstanding review fees. 3, address to the satisfaction of the township engineer any outstanding plan review comments from staff. Number 4, fully comply with College Township Code Section 180-12. Number 5, post surety as approved by the township engineer. And lastly, number 6, obtain intent to serve letters from both College Township Water Authority and UAJA.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Jen, anybody online wishing to speak to this?
No.
Okay. I'm going to make one set of comments, and it's referenced in our packet. There was an approved land development plan for a car wash recorded at the Center County Courthouse on August 2nd of 2016. That plan has expired, correct? But just for a general note, if there was a plan of record and a new plan comes forward, that supersedes it, or does there have to be some kind of rescind of that approval?
I would say that we would ask them to officially withdraw a plan prior to someone else
Got it.
getting a plan on that property.
Just procedural note, we don't usually, I can't remember one
Yeah,
where we've come in with another plan relatively so soon after an existing plan was on record, so that's good to know.
Follow-up to that, then.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Are we certain that we're back to the 5 years? There was,
Yes.
After COVID, yeah,
okay,
that was just,
that's a definite.
yes.
Okay.
Good question, good question. So it didn't get an automatic, okay, very good.
And even if it did, it's expired. It still is an expired plan.
Okay.
Regardless.
Okay, very good. Good procedural notes.
Make sure we don't have one on top of the other.
Yeah. Well, somebody come back and say, hey, wait a minute, you're stepping on my toes, kind of thing. So, okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mark, get the dumpster moved.
I'll look at it. Please. I'll have a look at it.
Thanks, Mark. Hey, general note, since, we're blowing through plans and everything, just, I'd like to throw a concept out or here or something like that. For these plans and stuff, could we develop some kind of check sheet that, when we get a plan before us, like example, the first is the staff cover memo, the next is the plan narrative, the next is references CATA, and it may be, say, not applicable, or
Like a
water,
template.
fire, code, all that kind of stuff. And then the presentation kind of follows that, and we, like, for example, the first Plan 1, we didn't have a plan narrative. But the cover sheet of the plan references that there was one as part of the submission.
Yeah.
That's always good to know. I think the staff interpretation of the narrative is very helpful for us.
Okay.
So that we're all clear on that and everything. The order is good. You know, questions come to mind. We intent to serve with water and sewer. What about electric? You know, what requirements are there that, I'm sure you guys are all looking at them, but for us to understand, no, I didn't request, yes, I did request, it's not applicable, you know, all that kind of stuff. I think that would help us in our review of these things.
Yeah, we can, in the next set of plans that come out, what we'll do is we'll develop kind of what I'll call an at-a-glance, which will be a single sheet with a number of these things on, where we'll be able to check them off, and we'll experiment a little bit
Yeah.
as far as what is going to be helpful, beneficial to council as we move through this.
Well, not just us, staff. I mean,
Yeah.
staff,
Actually,
planning commission, council.
when I was putting this PowerPoint presentation together, I decided that I'm gonna start that PowerPoint presentation when the plans are first submitted, because that kind of helps us all get acquainted better with the plan, because you're, you know,
Sure.
really digging into the details.
Yeah.
Was this format okay with the
Yes,
PowerPoints?
I know, I like the cover sheet that had a lot of the location, the details, and I think that was very helpful.
Okay.
In Rich's question, like for the example with the college UHA, is it, in this case, what I assumed is everybody requires that, theirs just hasn't come in yet? Is that?
Yeah, they haven't provided those to us. They have already. I mean,
So
since
in
then.
Rich's example, that would be one of the checkoffs, and the reason it appears here is because we hadn't received it yet.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, and I'll wrap it around. I sit on the county planning commission, and you should see Chris Schnorr has got a little OCD going on there, but there's no question on how things are going down. Am I right, Mike? I mean, boom, 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 you know exactly what's outstanding, what's been asked, what's, you know, all that good kind of stuff. I don't want to get that, I
Okay.
don't think we need to get that far in it, but just a check sheet, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's helpful.
Yeah, I think for all, so, thank you. Continuing on the agenda, special presentations, Schlow Library Annual Update.
Hi, I am Kimberly Fergola, your representative to the SCLO Library Board of Trustees. So thank you for having me here this evening. And joining me is Lisa Collins, Library Director. So following several, I'm not sure if this belongs here or if someone forgot it.
Oh, no, it's belongs there.
Okay, but we could grab them real quick. Anyway, you know, we had a lot of pandemic cautions going on, right? But as of now, the library is fully open again, so that's been really well received by the public, of course. And most recently, some of the children's items came back, some train tables and toys, etc. And it's really just bringing back the same old things that were there before, but to the children, it's like magic happened. So that's really exciting for everybody. Also, so I'm going to go through a couple things here. First, I'm going to talk about participation of College Township residents, and then a couple of things going on at the library, and then mention a couple things that the library does that you might not know goes on. So, compared to 2019, year-to-date, which was the last time we had a full January through March, the library is currently down in terms of circulation, thank you. I kept wanting to say ridership, I was stuck in that category. You know what, I'm gonna go with readership. Only down 12.76%, so we're considering that quite successful so far, and hope that.
That's better than ridership.
Yeah, definitely. That's not funny.
Yeah, sorry.
So anyway, what does that mean? In 2001, College Township residents alone checked out just under 60,000 pieces of material. Now that's physical pieces of material, and we all know that during the pandemic, it's the digital stuff that soared. So even without, electronic books, audiobooks, magazines, music, movies, none of that, still almost 60,000 pieces were borrowed by College Township residents in 2021. And that represents 16% of the full circulation. There are 2 remote returns in College Township. One is at the Nittany Mall, and it gets just under 1,500 items returned there in a year. And then the other one is at the Wise on North Atherton.
Or south.
South Atherton. And I also don't know if it's Weiss or Wise. I've
It's
lived here.
officially Wise.
Is it? Thank you.
I
'cause
saw a
I've
commercial
Been here over 2 decades.
just
now,
the other
so-
day. Public service announcement.
So that one at Wise then has over 15,000 items returned, which is enough that we actually had to replace that return with a larger receptacle there. And then a couple programs going on. So one is, actually, we just launched a couple days ago a refresh of the website. This website, glowlibrary.org, it gets over 1.4 million views a year, so it's significant. And why it needed refresh, 2 major things. One is critical security updates, which we all face in every industry. And then the other is just being responsive to feedback from the users and community. So we were able to incorporate a lot of those things. We have our summer reading program coming up. And I want to tell you, this is not the summer reading program from when I was a kid. It astounds me, the things I learned that the library does, even as a representative. So there's the reading program like when we were kids, of course, and then there's also a grant-funded music series, a partnership with the school district to take books to the kids attending their camps. There's a pilot program to take books out to the farmers markets, and then there's other, programming in the library in association with the summer reading program that helps create connections. So it's quite a summer bit going on there. And then the last thing I wanted to do is mention some of the other things you don't typically think about at the library. So there are adult book discussion kits. So these are books that will have multiple copies of a book and guides for questions, things like that, that a group can check out and use together to have a book club type experience. And then for kids, there are discovery packs. There's over 100 of those available. And those include things about music, colors, things to do, basically all different topics. And it has books, games, and materials to just explore and learn new things for kids. There are also toys, puzzles, games, all different ages. And then for adults, there's over 60 board games that can be used. And the last thing I want to mention is, if you have a child that is interested in languages and exploring them, there's over 400 bilingual children's books. So that's quite a resource too. So I just wanted to present that, hoping you learned a little something new about the library. And I'm happy to answer any questions, or more likely defer to Lisa.
Dustin, anything for?
Thanks for
Kimberly?
the opportunity to speak first. I just want to say thank you. I think the library is excellent here. I know my children frequent the place. We also just checked out a ukulele about a week ago, so we have some lesson books on that. But yeah, it's a great resource. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, one of the Center Region's best kept secrets. 2 things. One, I really appreciate during the pandemic, and even coming out of the pandemic, the little craft things that were put together for the kids, and the fact that if you were uncomfortable doing it there, you could actually go in and take it home with you and do it. I just thought that was a little thing, but it was just a really nice touch. And the second thing I'm conveying for a friend. This friend really appreciates the fact that if your book is overdue and it's a book that is eligible to be renewed, that it's automatically renewed. And again, my friend expresses his appreciation for that.
Do you have problems with due dates, Eric?
Deadlines,
You're retired, no more deadlines.
No, I have no excuse, none whatsoever. Thank you.
Paul, good luck.
Thank you. Yes, that's tough to follow. Actually, real quick question, and did I hear you right that there's 10 times higher usage at the Weiss?
Wise.
Wise,
Wise.
sorry.
Dry-
It's the Z that gets me.
My
Wise than at the mall.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, so for the mall in particular, what we were seeing is the mall was closed in 2021 for a period of time, but the Wise has always been incredibly busy. So busy, in fact, that we just purchased a brand new book return, because during the summer months, we might be picking up books there 2 or 3 times a day, just to keep up with the volume of returns. So it's really busy. Very convenient. We get lots and lots of great feedback on that one in particular. I think people love the fact that they can kind of combine their errands together, return their items, go and get some milk at the grocery store. So it's just been a wonderful partnership with the Wise Market.
It's a really interesting data point. And the reason I bring it up is because, we've certainly talked about the Dale Summit plan and, where the mall is, but there also may be a demographic component there with the retirement communities and some of the other things, or it could just be the resurgence of South Atherton as more of a commercial hub. So it's a very interesting data point. I'll be real interested to hear what happens next year with Rural King and some of the others. So I'd be very interested if you saw a change, just to come back and let us know.
Be happy to, absolutely. And with the Active Adult Center now being opened again, I think we're already starting to see those numbers climb.
Thank you for mentioning that.
So I think
awesome.
that's really exciting. We try to do a lot of partnerships with the Active Adult Center. We bring some book clubs and things like that out there. And seeing that really kind of come alive again, I think is going to be wonderful for people. They can, if they want to, sign up for a program there where they could put holds on their SCLO library items and pick them up at the Active Adult Center. So, we're fingers crossed coming out of COVID, we can kind of get that going again. I think it's a really neat opportunity. So.
Is that one of those pickup boxes I remember we talked about, like out in Half Moon? Where
It's not a locker. The only place that we have a locker right now is in Half Moon as our pilot project, but we're very interested in hopefully doing more of those, just because it's really being well received out there, and I think we've figured out how to do it. So yeah, it would be great.
I did have one more thing, but go ahead,
Oh,
Adam.
I'm sorry, I was just going to ask very quickly. Lisa, is it correct that there is not a drop box in Harris Township?
We do not currently have one in Harris Township, yes.
South Atherton Street, the Wise, is that it?
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
I think that's a contributing factor.
I'm on a
It could.
crusade.
Sure.
Yeah.
And to your point about the mall, the other thing that will be interesting to see, Pleasant Point is, ramping up, and the other development right next door that we just, so that you're getting some more population.
Yeah, well, I just think it's going to be it's a non-traditional data point that, because we can look at traffic, we look at those traditional things, but looking at the usage of that Dropbox kind of struck me as a cool thing. Speaking of cool things, the second thing I wanted to mention was the new website design, which I don't know if you mentioned it, but it's really great. And I was exploring on there, and you mentioned language learning. There's language learning software. There's just an amazing number of resources that I was kind of surprised. I'm not sure I'd check out a ukulele because that might be too loud, but maybe some language learning software might be cool. But anyway, I just wanted to commend you on that website redesign. It really is great.
I appreciate that, and I will absolutely bring that back to the SCLO team, because it really was just a very large team of individuals led by our head of IT, Nathaniel Rasmussen. Really top-notch work, and we are receiving great feedback. And also, we want to know what people love about it, but also what's not working the way that they would like to have it work. We are we value, you know, the positives, but we also value the negatives or the wish list. That's how we keep it being what the community wants and hopefully keep a step ahead of what people's expectations are, so.
Well, you've certainly done that to date, and just to echo Dustin's comments, I mean, it's a treasure in the center region, and thank you all for all you do, for serving on the board and for helping keep us engaged with this.
It's really easy because Lisa and her wonderful staff does all the work and I get to come and get the praise. So, but you know, we are having a special day on Tuesday, April 12th for library and the staff. So if you want to stop by and thank them, that'd be nice to stop
April
in.
12th?
Yeah,
What
Tuesday.
time?
What are the
Is there a
details?
time and location?
Anytime.
Throughout the day?
Yeah,
Okay.
just
Oh,
stop
okay.
by and let the staff know you
Excellent.
appreciate them.
Excellent.
Yeah, so
Thank you, that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. Carla?
Yeah, I mean, Lisa, I just really want to commend you for stepping in and just really taking that ball, giant ball, and just doing really wonderful things with it. So, you know, it was a scary step losing such a wonderful director after such a long time, but you've just really done an awesome job. So I just want to thank you personally. In a hard time, right? Like it's not business as usual or anything.
Nothing else going on the past couple of years, yeah.
Yeah. So the library children's department, my kids are just growing out of it, but still it holds such a dear place in my heart that I do hope that as the pandemic eases, that it comes back into its full glory. So that was like the most exciting thing I've heard all day, was just all of the programming and the exciting new things, and that it's still the children's department, you know, growing and getting, you know, more creative and
for
open.
For your kids, you know, there's programming all ages, so there's preteen and teen programming plenty as well.
Awesome.
It's actually going to be, it's a focus of ours. We know that our teens are, many of them struggling during coming out of the pandemic. So our head of adult services and myself, we're really focused on, we're looking at some grant opportunities. We'd like to expand to put a sort of a teen art gallery upstairs. So they have opportunities really to express themselves and really have a conversation with the community. We've purchased some new furniture. We're seeing kind of just the need for that particular age group to kind of come together and have time together. So we really are focusing in on that. So I would say if anyone has teens in their lives, young adults, you know, we want to know what they want. How can we help? So, you know, please, you know, let them know. We would be really appreciative of that feedback to make that space really what they need and want. So,
Oh, that's cool. Well, I appreciate knowing that. I have a lot of teens in my life.
I was gonna say, we probably have some adult children that we could loan you, but I'll pass.
And I may reach out about ideas, so thanks for saying that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, my peers have nailed it across the board. I couldn't add to it. The only thing I would ask, is there anything that we, College Township, or with our COG hats on, can do for the board or you, Lisa, that we can help with?
Nothing comes to mind immediately, but we will keep the offer.
I was gonna say, it's always there. It's always there.
Really, I think the most important thing is to let us know what your community is telling you they need. We try to be a library that is responsive, not what we think the community needs, but what the community is telling us they need, and we try to be very responsive to that. So if you are talking to people, I always say, I love it when people say, I wish I could at the
Right.
library. So if you have those things, you have that information, or you're doing a study, and there's an opportunity for the library to play a role and participate, we appreciate that very much and definitely would welcome that, so.
And I think you signal that with the feedback button right at the top of the brand-new website, and it's there. You know, it stresses that you want to hear that. Paul, you had something?
It's a comment. Carla's suggestion got me thinking, you know, she working in the school district and maybe doing something collaborative with the libraries. I can tell you that in my day job, I work with school districts all over the state. And that the mental health care issue, social and emotional learning and learning loss are really big topics in every school district. And to the extent that there's a dialogue open between the library or libraries, plural, and the school districts, I think that could really fill a need because the schools are really struggling right now with staffing and other things. So that's an encouraging potential avenue to explore. I just wanted to make that comment.
Great, excellent. Thank you both so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for inviting us to this evening. And I'll just close by saying I don't want to look at the dumpster either.
You missed your chance to pile on. All right, note, send Toretti, whatever time this is in the meeting, send him, he needs to look at that.
Got
He's
it.
still getting comments.
All right.
Great. Continuing on, reports, manager's update.
I'll just touch on a few important updates. Probably the most relevant within the next few weeks is that the Pike Street traffic calming project, construction will get underway. In the report, we had identified a date of beginning week of April 18th. It looks now more like the original schedule, which would be beginning the week of April 25th. But that project is well underway in terms of receipt of all of the necessary documentation as far as insurances, et cetera, but also shop drawings are being completed, et cetera. So we are, excuse me, we are on target at this point for construction to begin that last week of April. And once it does begin, keep in mind that you're looking at a minimum of a 6-month construction period. So we'll be, as we approach that date, we'll be communicating through the website, pushing out information on social media to make everybody aware of that. And I'm sure that we'll also be doing some other type of public service announcements that get a broader distribution so that others that are not frequent travelers are aware of what is going on. We had a joint meeting, workshop meeting with the Planning Commission last week relative to the Dale Summit Small Area Plan and conversations surrounding form-based code. Lindsay and Dawn and I and Mike have discussed the putting together a request for qualifications, and I'm hopeful to be able to get that to you folks. If not this next meeting, April 21st, by the first meeting of May. And we can begin to dissect that and get the necessary support from both PC and council to get that out onto the street so we can keep the momentum going. I will not speak relative to LTAC, but there was a meeting here recently and your representative will report on that. And the last item that I did want to touch on has to do with Thompson Woods Preserve. Our assistant township manager is in the process of drafting up the documents that we need to be considered jointly by both the Borough Council as well as College Township Council, that essentially creates the organization, the structure, if you will, for the joint governance of Thompson Woods Preserve. So that is ongoing. That has been delayed, but we are moving in the right direction, and I think that we'll be able to get things in motion relatively soon. So I'm pleased where we're at with that, even though I know there's been a delay. That's everything that I had, except for the fact, I'm sorry, I did want to draw your attention to a couple of items that were in the outgoing correspondence. Staff, Lindsay in particular, had done a review relative to Ferguson Township official map planning, and basically we replied with no real comments there. We also have provided to Center Region Parks and Recreation a letter of support for a grant that will be going toward additional development at Whitehall Road Park. And I wanted to bring to your attention that we have a second request for a similar letter of support for a grant for the Millbrook Marsh. I don't have that constructed as of yet, but I did want to point out that we will be supplying that letter from staff. I'll circulate that to council as it's ready to go out. But I just wanted to let you know that that is on its way, and that's everything that I have.
The only thing I would add on the letter of support, pledge of support for the grant, that was due Wednesday. That went out to all the municipalities. All the municipalities submitted a letter in support, as well as COG did and everything. So that grant went forward. The $75,000, it's a matching grant. So what they've looked at, you know, should they be fortunate to be awarded it, where's that money coming from? And they've already got a real good plan of how that would play out and everything. So I think that gave everybody comfort to move forward with that. So, other questions for the manager? Yes,
Quick
please.
one, if you don't mind. Under the Path to Campus agenda item, it mentions that we're looking to submit to the Commonwealth Finance Agency. It says spring 2022. Do you know when that deadline is, or are we tracking that?
Yeah, I can touch on that. We have done some research on that. It's due end of July. So it's actually into the summer. It's a little later than I initially anticipated. But I'm starting to weed through what we need to update that. And to be honest with you, in the past when I've done applications like this, it's basically you pick up the boilerplate language and drop it into it. We may need to update a couple of the support letters, but beyond that, this isn't the heavy lift. We did that when we did PennDOT.
I just didn't want to, when I said spring, maybe we just update that to say summer, so that we know, or if we have a particular date. I just think, we don't want to lose track of that, because that's a really big piece of what we want to do, so. Thank you. I didn't think the ball was dropped ever, I just wanted to know
That date initially
when it
came
was.
from, it opens up here in the spring, but the deadline's in July. So.
Okay, fair enough.
It's still spring. Don't rush it.
I know it's
Don't rush
spring,
it.
but it's.
You blink and it's gone, yeah.
Yes.
Eric, anything? Yeah, please.
Quick question for Adam, on the Lamont streetscape, so that I can share with my neighbors, the traffic pattern will be such that through traffic will not be allowed.
There will be through traffic at all times, with the exception during tree removal, which may be temporary closures of all traffic. But there will be through traffic in the direction of the light at Lamont to Pike Street intersection with Hauserville Road.
Okay, because I know there was an attempt to try to discourage that through signage. Like you could get in there if you turned off somewhere, but you were not supposed to go in there if you were headed through. We're not even going to try to do that.
No, it's only we've kept the one-way traffic, and I'm gonna get my directions, but from south to north. Well, I don't know, I always hate giving directions around
From
here.
Lamont to the mall.
But from Lamont to the mall, that is going to be,
Snow, Ohio.
that is going to be through traffic all the time. The sides of the street will be moved, but in order to facilitate emergency response, fire vehicles, et cetera, we determined that the best direction is through Lamont in that direction. They will keep one side of the street open at any given time, so to allow for that.
That's College to Elmwood? No.
Elmwood to College.
Elmwood to College.
Elmwood to College. Is that the same direction as last year? Yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, so it'll be a refresh.
Lifelink,
So
fire, EMS.
if you were coming down College Avenue from the mall, you will see a sign on Pike Street that says road closed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is the same as before.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
He complicated it,
I
but
did,
yes, it's the
that's
same
what I
as
did.
last year.
Okay.
Do you have any more complicated questions for Adam? No?
Could be anything.
I was just wondering with the Thompson Woods committee thing, can we put a time frame on that? Just, or do you not feel comfortable?
I mean, we can try, but I
dealing
have
with a lot
a
of
lot of
other-
confidence in in College Township's ability to move through that fairly rapidly.
Okay.
I have less confidence and really no real sense of that time with respect to the borough process. That's my only hesitation in saying that. Within the next several weeks, within the next month or two, I just
I
don't
mean-
really know.
Can we just move forward and have them sign
Oh,
on the
yeah.
dotted line?
Well, sure, no problem. But I mean, as far as, I mean, the task at hand is, and Mike can probably speak to this more, there's been some research that needed to be done relative to the type and form of the agreement, the resolutions that we needed to craft. And Mike is finishing off that right now. And once that's done, we'll get a quick review from our solicitor on that. And then, I mean, as soon as we have that initial review from the solicitor, we'll forward it on to the borough manager as well as their solicitor, and they can look at it. And I suspect that there, you know, this is kind of like a conference committee kind of a thing, I suspect. There's going to be a few things that the borough may want to see in that proposed resolution that we may have to come back and work into what we have. But as soon as that process is done, the approval thereof should be pretty straightforward. It would go to College Township Council, it would go to the borough, and it would be passed, and we would be ready to then move forward with, you know, creating the governing body and those kinds of things. So, but we just have to have the structure in place. I honestly don't think it'll take too long, but I'm not sure what to say about the overall language.
We've already been challenged by that
Yeah, I know.
to this point. So that's, I understand your hesitation to, you know, to put a start, especially you're dealing with another body that we have no control over. And they seem to have enough fights of their
Yeah,
own
I mean,
going on.
if I had to place if I had to actually give my best guess, at some point in May, this should be wrapped up, and it should be, we should be at a point where we're appointing delegates to participate in that committee.
May?
That's-
I thought we were talking like September here.
I was
Well,
hoping
I
for
mean-
July, but you know.
Well, again, we're in, this is April
That's not even
7th.
Yes.
summer.
Okay, probably by the end of next week, the middle of the following week, our work will be wrapped up. Our
Okay.
solicitor will have reviewed it. It will have been sent to the borough. So that's still April.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. I get it.
I'm optimistic that
Yeah, you're more optimistic than me. My day hat's in the borough and
well,
so
and
Well, my
again,
6-month bet
that-
was-
I mean, I'm being pressed for a date, and that's probably the
well,
most.
just, you need to be realistic because, you know.
Well, you know, to point out some of the things that have been pointed out to us that have been occurring in Thompson Woods and some of the concerns, right? Like the trash, you know, camping, fires, et cetera, right? What articles or governing documents right now are saying you cannot or shall not do that in Thompson Woods?
Our only governing documents are all related to our park
Yeah.
ordinances that we have. And there is a list of those shalls and do nots that are at one of the entrances to the park. But to be honest, because there is not constant surveillance at the
Yeah,
park,
that was my
it's an
question.
honor
How do we
system
enforce
issue.
it,
Yeah.
right? How do we enforce it?
I-
And whose
The same as
obligation is it
at
to
any of our
enforce?
parks.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
So whose obligation is it to enforce? Does that fall underneath the State College Borough Police that we have a contract with?
It can, and it depends on what happens. We also have contracts, for example, we've had numerous complaints about dogs off leashes, et cetera, et cetera. We've actually had, we contract services for dog enforcement with the Borough of State College, very similar to what we do with the police. We've actually had the dog enforcement officer on site on many occasions, early in the morning, later in the evenings, et cetera, on some special assignments or details, if you will. And, you know, it's one of those things that you need to be, you must be present to win. I mean, you need to be there when those violations are occurring in order to effectively police it and enforce it. And to this point, we have been unsuccessful in doing that.
So, you know, I just, as we move ahead with this, enforcement seems to be an issue no matter how well we write our governing ordinances and things like that, correct? Because we can't be there 24/7, so just a comment in general that I had back when I was in Parks and Rec. I don't think, a structure like a fence is going to prevent something like that, personally. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Well, and again, I think some of these decisions are the intent of the governing entity
That'll be
is to
discussed
make some
in
of those
some of
types
those,
of
yeah.
decisions.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think that we can evaluate that from our positions and come up with solutions. But the idea of having a dedicated governing body that is basically entrusted with the care and keep of the preserve may have a different approach to dealing with some of those aspects.
Would it be safe to say for the public listening, though, that if they do, want to, uphold Thompson Woods and help protect it, and see some of those illegal activities happening, to just call the borough police?
If they witness it, yeah, absolutely, that's the most effective course of action. Again, because in order for enforcement activity to happen, they need to be present when
They need to witness it.
They
It
need to
needs to be
witness
witnessed,
it. And
yes.
That's the biggest,
Yeah.
one of the.
Yeah,
one of the
reacting
bigger-
after the fact, it's a never
I mean,
ending.
if I was a policeman, I'd love to camp out in Thompson Woods for a night.
Yeah. Full well.
Apparently, you can do it without being a
Yeah, there you go. Full camo, we'll just camo up, we'll hang in there, and it'll be all good. Did you have anything else?
No, that's it. I did. Sorry, Adam. I just was kind of looking like I was thinking like a 4-month deadline. That's where I was heading in my mind. So the May thing is
It'd be
an
great,
optimistic perspective, and I hope that that's true. And that's exactly what I was looking for. Was like, what are we talking here? And that's all. So I appreciate it.
Just very quickly, we have been doing work with the partners, if you will. So we have had conversations over the last several months, going back into last year, with borough staff, with park staff, with Clearwater Conservancy. And we have met on several different occasions to have these conversations. Where we ended up is we need to get these resolutions in place and really take this next big step. So a lot of that work has in fact been done. These are detail related in order to set the structure.
So following up on that, just from a procedural standpoint, the agreement and everything, that's not a public hearing type thing, that's a administrative through council type?
Yeah, council will review it
Okay.
because ideally what will be happening, what must happen is both the borough and College Township need to pass an identical resolution.
Sure. And then the second part, is there anything that needs unwound so that this can wind up?
No, at this point, that's one of the reasons why this is necessary.
Because there is
What
nothing
had
wound.
been in place, was weak,
Yep,
and ancient
Yep.
by
And
time
dysfunction,
standards.
yeah.
And so, no, all of that has
Okay,
already occurred.
yep.
No unwinding necessary.
sounds great. Dustin, anything else for
No,
Adam?
thank you.
Okay, great. Continuing on, COG Regional County and Liaison Reports. I think I'm starting with Eric.
Yes. Part of the problem with that is we're the ones with the most at stake here. And the other partners don't have a lot of motivation to come to the table or reach resolution and work with us. So I don't mean to drag it out, but in fairness to the staff effort, because this precedes your term, Adam and I had quite a bit of discussion about this last calendar year. How can we motivate the partners to come to the table and work with us better? I have 3 quick reports. The first has to do with the meeting that I attended. I think Paul was there also, Wednesday, March 30th, which was the preview for elected officials of the update on the planning and environmental linkage study for State College Area Connector. we got a bit of a preview or an executive summary of what was going to be shared then in the following 2 open houses, which were this week, Tuesday in Bollesburg, and then just last night in Center Hall. And a couple of interesting points. I saw Carla in Bollesburg. There was over 400 people signed in during the 5 hours of the open house in Bollesburg, which was very encouraging. And I just found out today there was over 250 people signed in at Center Hall. So exactly what Pell is intended to do, it's doing. For the sake of brevity here, if you've been following this process, there's really 3 notable changes since the round of public hearings in September. And the first one has to do with environmental data collection. If you went to the open house, what you saw was a lot more information on the maps, a lot more areas identified, and as a result, these things affected the data that went in and fed the matrices that showed the pros and cons of the different alignments. So very successful integration of what PennDOT learned in September in this round of open houses. The second thing was a much more detailed, a more in-depth traffic analysis. What you saw in this round of open houses was more granularity to the data, and they just went down several levels as far as the through traffic, the percentage of the through traffic that was large trucks. You know, it was really good stuff. And they just went back to the table. They went back and they attacked some more resources and just got better traffic data that told us, told us a lot more about where the traffic is going through the corridor right now, what type of traffic it is as far as size of vehicle. Good stuff. And the last thing that kind of flew under the radar that you didn't really pick up going around and looking at the boards, but had a profound impact through all of the design elements was the build corridor refinements. And what I mean by that is PennDOT went back and re-engineered the design elements for all the options to fit a 55 mile per hour speed limit profile versus 70. And in very general terms, what that really means is it really reduces the impact. Because if you're designing for 55 miles an hour, you don't need as wide a turn, you just don't need as much berth. You don't need as much cartway, you don't need as much right-of-way. It just really significantly reduces the footprint and therefore the impact of all of those. So those are the highlights. I will editorialize a bit here and say that for the sake of anybody that's listening, I was a little dismayed, disappointed with how the media coverage came out prior to the open house. I don't know if anybody read it, but it really didn't do justice, I think, to the effort that PennDOT is undertaken here with the Pell. I think most disappointing was the comments made by some of the municipal officials in the media coverage that seemed to support the concept that this is a done deal. The corridor has already been chosen. I think that's really harmful, and it just doesn't do justice to this incredibly deliberate process that PennDOT is going through this Pell study. As you can see from my examples, the input that was taken in the first set of open houses was fully integrated into this set of open houses and will be considered as PennDOT makes their final Pell recommendations. I think part of this is due to confusion, and Mike can appreciate this. In the past, the first time the public really got a look at plans like these were after the preliminary engineering was done. And what you saw was what PennDOT had decided were the best options. We are way before that. This is a whole new process that says before we decide what options we're going to sink resources into to do some preliminary engineering, we want to hear from everybody. We want to know what we don't know. And we want to use that information to determine what we put into the preliminary. And I think there's a bit of confusion there. People are thinking that maybe that this is that second step where some decisions have already been made. And I'm just here tonight to tell folks, anybody that will listen, that that's not the case. That this is a very different, this is a new step, a new program intended to collect data that isn't necessarily collected, hasn't in the past been collected in this format, and certainly not to this degree. So just in case you were interested, I have a lot of faith in the process. Obviously, when we get to the end, there may be folks who don't agree with the decisions that were made, but it won't be because people didn't have the opportunity to approach and talk to PennDOT staff face-to-face and learn as much as they can about the options and give them as much input as they can regarding the options. So, second quick report, I attended facilities. This will be quicker. It was 3 updates, and I didn't get a written report done, but we got updates on 3 subjects. First was Whitehall Road Regional Park. Kathleen was here to share the big news from that one. The second was the Millbrook Marsh Nature Center, Spring Creek Education Building Phase 2, and the Welcome Pavilion. What I will say is that we're far enough along, they claim to be far enough along, that the boardwalk kickoff meeting, we should be hearing about a boardwalk kickoff meeting here within the next month or 2, which is good. That's interesting. There's some data they're still collecting some data, but they anticipate that there'll be a kickoff meeting in the next month or 2. And then we got an update from staff on the CIP planning process and capital budget update, which Rich will probably share more detail with us as we try to integrate the capital planning process more in line with the budget development and the program plan, and bring in department heads and stuff. The item that we had the most discussion on, surprisingly, was the COG building ownership transfer. And this one caught me by surprise. It has been vetted, that the concept of turning the COG building over to the COG in 2026, I think, 2025. I thought that idea had been vetted through various COG committees and even unofficially endorsed by the General Forum, has met some resistance from members in the Facilities Committee who are having some second thoughts about whether it's the best idea to turn it over to COG. My comment was, I thought we're still in the process of gathering data and determining how that would work and what the impacts were. So just a heads up that there was some resistance expressed at the Facilities Committee to the concept that the COG building would be deeded over to COG upon the completion, the end of the lease.
Interesting. Let me guess. I could guess which municipality, but.
It kind of caught me by surprise, and that's why I'm just sharing it, that I thought we'd kind of all walk together down this road.
We did. We did. It was vetted through the solicitor. The issue is that, and we're actually going through this with Parks a bit, is that the documents don't support everybody's understanding. And it's come out that they pushed it through with this intentional grayness because that's all they could back then. And they figured future COG general forums would figure it out and everything. So that's what we started well in advance of the, that's been going on since the first year of the Facilities Committee. And it went through there, and it was reported through the finance, through exec, through general forum. Unfortunately, there's still a couple of the old school members that, no, we own this, and no, the documents don't support you in that. But even with that, if you just follow the money, the municipalities gave the money to build the building. COG has paid back the money that was used to build the building. At the end of that,
It will have been paid back at the end of the lease.
Exactly, exactly, in complete. And the other part is, there is no deeding of the building to COG. COG already owns it.
Yeah, I stuck that word in there. It was
Yeah,
inaccurate.
Well, but still, there's actually some that, so one of a story that I ran into, and I don't know if you're with Army Reserve and Army National Guard armories and stuff, generally the state owns the land and the Army Reserve builds the building on that. And so the old adage, the one in Bellefonte, was they got into a pissing contest about the renewal, and the National Guard said, all right, get your building the hell off my land, and everything. So, if not, you're abandoning it in place and everything. So it's in that same vein. But yes, it has been vetted through, and the most efficient process is, and again, if you follow the money, okay, if we're gonna rent it, who gives COG money to pay rent? The municipalities, so you're gonna pay one way or the other, but the legal documents themselves support that it was a capital lease, that at the end of it, that
So just a heads up, nothing's.
oh yeah, we're gonna get it in finance next, even though we've already gotten it in finance and
We got 6
everything.
years to
The
figure it out.
managers have all, I'll blame the managers, and I think it was a good recommendation. That was their, how do we get out of this? Because there's potential black eyes in how it was handled. And so that's why we wanted the managers.
Originally, when it was set up.
Yep. And so we wanted them to have a vote in how we work ourselves out of that and everything. So, the other one, to your CIP, yes, that we kind of saw that at General Forum a little bit, but the big thing is that it's a much more structured process.
Yeah,
And
like what the real world uses is what I'd like
yeah,
to see,
yeah.
I keep referring to
But
that.
the big thing that has been started, I've been working with the draft agenda for finance, is that it's not absolute. Everything that happens as of March 1st, this is it. We're not gonna entertain anything. You can't do that. The real world happens between, then and whatever.
But it's like the fleet plan. We gotta have a plan, even though it's going to be fluid and adjust, but we
Yep.
can't make decisions without some kind of
Exactly.
general plan.
Yep.
Context.
Yeah, so much more structured, much better detail, hopefully a much more livable
A
document.
lot of this is the benefit having Lou on board.
Absolutely.
He brings that skill set to the table that COG has gotten to the point they need now.
Absolutely. Yep.
Hey, the last committee report, real quickly, and I need to share this because this one thing is pretty exciting to me, was today's meeting at Lucy. We had a joint meeting with the Land Use and Community Infrastructure Committee and the Center Region Planning Commission. We have those twice a year. 2 items. One was the final update on the primary scale solar study and toolkit. That'll be coming our way soon. There's really it's really was in final draft form today. There were no significant comments. And really, we're a little bit ahead in the sense that we already have as allowed use in our industrial zoning district. But I did learn through the process that Patton allows it in almost all their zoning districts, and Ferguson allows it, I think, in mostly their ag zoning districts. But it'll give us something as we move forward with looking at potential requests that come in, or even our current zoning. We'll have something to reconcile against. Because the toolkit will be in a semblance of best practices and references and things that we probably didn't have easily at our disposal when we put together our plan to accommodate, the solar. So, and I forget what the name, what we're really talking about is industrial level solar. Somebody who comes in and wants to build enough solar that they can resell it. We're not talking about somebody putting panels on their house. The last thing was that, just a heads up, that the comp plan framework is change in the framework is being proposed. And this is a big one because I'm a big fan of the comp plan, but in general terms, the comp plan provides information, guidance for municipalities. Well, first of all, we're required to create a comp plan, but but most of it is in silos, transportation, housing, those kinds of things. And when we want to go to the comp plan for reference, we got to kind of look inside those silos. The planning agency is interested in reformatting it so that it becomes more of a, removing the silos and putting solutions, be more solution-based. So, for example, our comp plan would have 4, 5, 6, or 7 goals and objectives that would cross silo, that would include recommendations, information, experience from all the silos. So it would be much easier for us to use it as a guideline. That's an oversimplification, but that is the idea. You might hear about it more in some of your other COG committees, but everyone around the table from both communities universally endorse the concept, primarily because we all think it will become more usable. We'll be able to more easily use it and integrate it into our own individual municipal planning efforts. And also the general public will be able to read it and actually digest it and understand what our regional vision is. Right now you have to go into the individual silos and you kind of get a vision for each one of those areas, but you don't get the bigger picture vision. So at least that's the goal. So.
No, Mike, I mean, we went through this in the county. The county, their latest comp plan follows this new format more. Liz Loesch is a great asset if you get into that.
Yeah, it seems to be a trend to go
spearheaded.
more in this direction now.
Yep, it was a great document. Liz did a great job working through it, so I'm sure she'll be an asset to the Center Region planning staff in working through that.
So that was today's meeting.
Excellent. Questions for Eric?
Just a real quick comment,
Yeah.
if you don't mind. I attended the State College Area Connector meeting too, and it really, they did make a lot of changes from originally to the end, and I think that big one was the 70 to 55, because where it might tie in, right, out by Pleasant Gap, or certainly the curve right here underneath between Branch Road and College, they didn't want to have a 70 coming down
That's
into a
really a good
55.
Yes.
Speed limit.
The speed limit,
Yep.
excuse me,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
70 miles per hour to a 55 mile per hour. They didn't want to funnel that in with, you know, potential truck traffic and those kind of things. And that, I do remember, was a specific comment that came in from the
Yes.
public when they did that. So I just wanted to give a very concrete example of the way they're listening. And they're also doing some pretty sophisticated modeling around safety features and the number of accidents and the number of potential fatalities on the different routes and those kind of things. So it was very impressive, the amount of work that they're putting into it on the front end. So I just wanted to.
No, that's a really good point. They didn't really want to create a speed trap on both ends of the new road.
Yeah.
Because you know what's going to
Dangerous.
happen. If it drops from 55 to 70, everybody's not going to drop to 55 right away. So.
And on that curve, that could have real consequences.
Yes, sure. We don't want to be feeding more 70-mile-an-hour people into,
Absolutely.
which I think is signed below 55 now. I think they reduced that.
40, isn't it 40?
Branch Road.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I have.
Great. Anything else for Eric? No? Paul, anything since last
No.
we met?
No.
Okay. Carla?
Yeah, thanks. So we had LTAC last week, Local Traffic and Advisory Committee, where we met with the Oak Ridge Avenue and, well, yeah, Shamrock, thank you, Center Hills Village. It's after 9. I'm done. I'm like really struggling to get, it's not even after 9.
It's
almost
8:45,
9.
but
Oh,
okay.
I can do this. Okay.
You got this.
Whew.
You
Okay.
got this.
So as you recall, we denied the recommendation to study closing Squirrel Drive. That went back to LTAC. Thankfully, the neighborhood committee had already met before we met and decided on their own that they would recommend a phased approach starting with speed humps. So that made our job much easier. We talked a lot about the phased approach. I personally was pushing hard for coming up with a plan, through the whole system, because we don't really have a plan for a phased approach of these things. There's some give and take. I suggested that I would sit down with Amy before the next meeting and draw out a suggested plan so that at least we have something to look at and to approve. As I think somebody else said, it's much easier to look at something that's there than make it up on the spot. And then also have some metrics in place for what the reasoning to move to a next phase, should there be a reasoning. So there's a lot to iron out there, but a motion was made to move forward with phase one, to recommend moving forward with phase one speed humps. Go ahead.
The
You can
motion was
fix
made
it.
to-
It's a lot. The motion's about this long.
Yeah, to authorize Trans Associates.
Yeah, so,
to provide- okay.
sure, okay. I mean, again, it's super long, but, yeah, to prepare a proposal for engineering study, cost, and phase design approach for the Oak Ridge F, et cetera, et cetera. Keeping in mind that, we want to keep the phased approach terminology all the way through. So everywhere it goes, that stays with it, so it's not lost. And then also, we requested that the traffic engineer, in designing the speed humps, give us a couple of options, one of which keeps in mind future potential phases. We don't want speed humps overlapping pinch point potential spots, things like that. But we also don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot and not put the speed humps we need because we might have wanted a pinch point there in the future.
Yep.
So I asked for a couple options there. So I think we worked well. It was a good meeting.
Good. Just to, confirm, we denied the request for funding of studying only closing.
Yeah.
It wasn't, we're not saying that'll never happen, could never happen, but it's so refreshing to hear that what we were trying to convey, that, the phased approach, that it was heard. And,
Right.
and as quick as we can implement phase one, that would be great.
Yeah, and there was some concern about how soon we could get traffic studies started. So Don went ahead and said, well, we asked Trans Associates to just start the traffic study as soon as possible. It's a minimal cost, so without having,
Counters.
they're already up. Yeah, we just didn't want it to get to where,
I see
See them all the time.
yeah, we didn't want to get to where this Penn State was out, and then all of a sudden we were ready to do it. So I thought that was also another
Absolutely.
good compromise and a good move.
Yep. Yeah, I like the direction that the whole thing's going. I mean, we've made it clear, doing nothing is not an option. So doing something as soon as possible is a good option. So
Yeah, yeah.
That's great, so thank you.
And then I do also just, I was at the open house in Ballsburg with PennDOT, and I just wanted to add to what Eric said. I did speak to a gentleman who, Eric, you were saying that the plan is not set in, it's not decided. This is the process, they are listening, and I found it very interesting. The gentleman that I spoke with said that he was, they were really looking at these open houses to see who came out and what people were saying. And unfortunately, what they were finding was that both people were speaking against both the 144 and the 322. And so he was just kind of like they were really hoping it would bubble to the surface, the clear answer would bubble. And he, at that time, that was just some point on Tuesday, his anecdote was it is not clear right now. And that just speaks to what you said. He would never have said that if they already knew, in the back room what they were planning to do. So.
And to follow up on that, these folks who are attending this, they have no vested interest in which way it goes. And the PennDOT engineers and the consultants, this isn't their favorite thing to do, to go out and stand at these things after hours. They're doing it because it's part of the process, and they've made a commitment to be open and to gather this data.
Yeah.
So I just want to say it as often as I can and as loud as I can, for anyone who thinks this is a done deal, it's not. These people are out there doing what they said they would do, and that's listening to folks, taking input, and then they'll be back with recommendations based on that.
Yeah.
Did you happen to go to Center Hall last night too, or just? Okay.
Sue had her hand
Oh,
up, just
thanks.
to bring to your attention.
Yeah, you can't have something as massive as this project, and it's not gonna have impacts.
Somebody's going to be impacted.
Somebody is gonna be impacted, and that they're investing as much effort and time and to minimize those, but zero is not an option in that.
Yeah.
It's too massive.
The no-build approach.
Yeah, the Bloom variant, yes.
And if I might just interject, that was one of the most dangerous ones, because traffic is projected to continue
Right.
to increase
Right.
regardless. I mean, if you just do nothing, you look at the crash rates and the fatality rates. and
Which
it's-
was offered at the open house.
Yeah.
Right,
And by the way, I should mention, all of this information is online.
yes.
You didn't need to attend in person. You have access to everything that was in the open house online, and you can provide comments very easily online.
Great, great. Sue, I see your hand, Sue Smith, I see your hand. Did you have a comment on that matter?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Ron and I were there early, just after 4 o'clock, and there were at least 200 people there. We were really pleased that there were so many people there, and every person that we spoke to said, why isn't there something that doesn't destroy farmland and valleys and creeks and watersheds? And will they even think about adding another lane or two to the current alignment and enforcing the speed limit? I mean, we've been past where it's no passing several times lately of trucks going 70 on the no passing parts. And there just seems to be no enforcement, so we were just really glad there were so many people there. I mean, did not speak to anybody who thought any of the alignments was any good. And they were doing the same tactic of getting the Collier people against the Cedar Run Valley people against the, don't put it in my backyard thing that they did before. And so we just told them, do something reasonable. It's not so expensive. So, my 2 cents. Not that it don't be my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thanks, Sue, appreciate it. Carly, any other
That was it for this, yeah.
Any other reports?
Nope.
Great. Dustin?
Last but not least, HR committee did meet on Wednesday. So we had a pretty busy meeting. So there's a number of bullet points to discuss, but I'll read through them pretty quickly. So we did approve a job description for the part-time staff assistant for the fire. This was part of the 2022 budget process and approved that way. We did approve the contract, the recommendation for the contract award for GovHR USA to move to both the executive committee and general forum for approval. This is the contract for the COG classification and compensation survey. It will include the 3 elements: base bid wage, benefits survey, as well as there was a couple alternates to choose, and alternate number 3, which is the classification system update. Also just note that GovHR USA, the same one that's in that pack, so if you look through the agenda, also has a proposal for College Township in there as well for our positions for compensation study. Parks and Rec, we got a briefing for the staffing study that was conducted. If any of you guys know the history, that was funded through a DCNR grant. And that was shared with committee. The study highlighted significant staffing shortages. It was actually quite compelling if you look at the study on how short we are on parks. The recommendation, I think, landed somewhere around, and I didn't have the presentation, I wrote this up, but somewhere in the around increasing the staffing up to around 55 or 56 personnel. And we are largely really under-resourced there when we talk about Parks and Rec staff, and just for the amount of work that we have. Recommended hiring then through the next 5 years of plan up through 2027. This study will be used in the preparation of the 2023 position request, and will come back to committee on the 4th of May. There was also extensive presentation and discussion, the presentation given by the staff talking about CPI-U for 12 months that came up ending on 31 January, right? That was, anyone knows, actually I don't know what the acronym stands for, anybody know?
CPI, Consumer
Yes.
Price Index,
Yeah,
urban.
Yeah, urban. So that was at 7.5%. As we all know, right, inflation was huge this year. So discussion was presented by the staff around the need for the general forum, because the general forum has to approve anything above or exceeding 5%, right? So this was brought up by the staff and just discussion around a further elaboration and comparison of the municipalities, the COLA raises that have seen in the past year and the merit increases. So the COG is on the low side. I will note that we are also on the low side, pretty comparable to the COG, and low in comparison to others. Points made by the staff, we're low again in comparison to the other municipalities. And this is just a difficult thing for them to deal with as far as, both attracting talent and retaining talent. And, a lot of discussion around, how do we attract, retain talent, how do we have competitive wages and so on and so forth. So more to come on that. Staff just requested the committee consider points made and, as we look into the COG budget process recommendations for the year. Last but not least, we did approve the revised 2022 COG salary schedule dated 6th of April. And this now includes, the only revision includes the newly added finance administrator position, no other changes.
Questions for Dustin? One comment, we'll arrange some quality time for you and Adam to discuss CPI-U and how it's calculated and how the COG calculates it, and just so there's an understanding of that when you go into that discussion. It's fun. Okay, I haven't had any official meetings. I've had a meeting or two, but not any official ones yet. Moving on to staff, PC, and other committee.
Hey, can I go back to LTAC for a minute?
Yes, sure thing.
I just want to, for the record, express my appreciation to LTAC for staying professional, for your perseverance through this. I know it was difficult, some of the discussion got kind of contentious, maybe overly personal, so I just want to express my appreciation for staying the course, and to the neighborhood for seeing what our intent was and understanding that we want to help them and that we think there was a better way to help them. So to everyone involved, it was a little rough at first, but I think we're where we want to be now, where that wasn't possibly as clear last month when we were sitting around the table.
And if I might just add
Paul,
real
sure.
quickly, I live in the neighborhood, and I was going around, I was actually collecting petition signatures, so I actually ended up talking to a lot of folks on Oak Ridge, and I think the message that we are committed to doing something, we just want to do the right thing, came through loud and clear to most of the folks that I spoke with.
Excellent.
And it couldn't have been easy for LTAC. I know, besides Carl, I talked to another member, and it's keep the faith, they did, it was very hard.
It just more kudos to our ABCs, the professionals and good people that we have on all of our ABCs. We're very, very fortunate. And LTAC's just one of many examples. PC, Mr. Dara is not with us this evening. He did offer a written report indicating that they met this past Tuesday, continued their discussion on walkable pathways for the township, did review the matrix to be used for the possibility in some cases of basically a waiver. I think it's a waiver, the waiver matrix and everything, and applied several test case studies to it to see how they would grade out and everything. I would just offer, for those that weren't aware, that council and PC met in a joint session on March 29th. I know personally, that was a wonderful meeting, very educational, very collegial. I think we made some good discussions and thoughts for moving the township forward. So I look forward to our next joint meeting on that. Staff, any other report? Okay, we move on to our diversity, equity, and inclusion reports. Again, we invite the public to offer anything towards that, or any staff or any council members that might have anything that appropriately fits under that.
Go ahead.
Paul? Raise my hand. Sure, why not? Since we last met, I just wanted to bring folks' attention to two events. The first was the Osage Day of Unity, which was on May 20th. There were a whole series of events that day.
March 20th?
It was March 20th, yes.
You said May, I think.
Did I? Oh, I'm sorry. It is 9
It's
o'clock.
9
See,
o'clock.
now it is after 9 o'clock.
Yeah, it's 9:02.
Now you have an excuse.
Yeah. I'm
You
sorry.
guys are spoiled by
March
50-minute meetings.
20th. Anyway, it was a great day. I attended a few of the events, including the rally at the State College Borough Building. It was very positive, as was March 31st, the Transgender Day of Visibility. There was a rally at the gates that I was in attendance at, and again, a very nice showing with the community coming out in support. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of those.
Excellent. Anyone else have anything?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to throw out that the Anti-Bias Coalition, which is a subgroup of the CCU, the Campus and Community and Unity. So the Anti-Bias Coalition is reconvening and looking for people interested and just sort of helping out. One of their goals is to fill this part of the agenda in each of the municipal meetings. So we're making up a calendar and having just people from each of the communities volunteer to bring a message and just kind of keep showing up. So anybody who's interested in that can reach out to me or anybody on council, and I'll look at to where it needs to go. Thanks.
Excellent. Anything else? Staff, public, council? Excellent. Thank you very much. The consent agenda for today's meeting consists of 2 sets of minutes. March 17th, 2022, public hearing for Ordinance 02201, and our regular meeting minutes from March 17th, 2022. Correspondence. We received a letter from Moving On dated March 17th, 2022 regarding the annual PSU student-sponsored Spring Music Festival. We received a letter from Geisinger dated March 17th, 2022 regarding time extension for their land development plan to July 12th, 2022. We received a letter from HRG dated March 23rd, 2022 regarding UAJA's DEP permit application to continue operating the Spring Creek Pollution Control Facility. We received an email from Daniel Materna dated April 3rd, 2022 regarding follow-up on proposed casino-related letter. And we are also adding an item that we received earlier today, an email and an attachment from Mr. Gene Bazan dated April 6, 2022 regarding comments on the draft wireless communication facility ordinance. We'll be discussing that later in the agenda, but we wanted to include that as a consent agenda item so that it is accepted into the public record. Finally, we have CA3 action items. We have an appointment of Ms. Noreen Corey to the Parks and Recreation Committee, fulfilling the vacancy with a term expiration of 12/30. I'm sorry, I apologize. Mr. Stephen Spoonamore. Apologize. This was part of the exec session earlier, by the way. Appointment of Mr. Stephen Spoonamore to the Parks and Recreation Committee member, fulfilling the vacancy with term expiration of 12/31/24. Further, we are under Resolution R-22-05, appointment of alternate members to the Planning Commission. We are appointing two individuals, Ms. Noreen Corey and Mr. Matt Fenton. Council's going to keep me straight on that, okay? That is this evening's consent agenda. Does council wish any of those items pulled?
Question on the alternate. We're really doing is, we're passing the resolution.
Wouldn't it be?
Are we combining the passing of the resolution and the appointment into one action?
Yeah, well, I can read the resolution. Now therefore be it resolved that the College Township Council, Center County, Pennsylvania hereby authorizes and appoints the two
Okay.
individuals as alternate members of the Planning Commission for a partial term of 4 years effective this day, April 7th, 2022 until December 31st, 2025. Okay? Any other questions or desire for anything to be pulled?
Very quickly, CA2C.
Yes.
The HRG. I'd like to make a real quick comment about that.
Please.
Just wanted to indicate that there is a second page to that that should coincide with the HRG letter. This is a draft response that was crafted by our assistant engineer, Jerry Northridge. The reason that we crafted this is in a previous permit review, as we were dealing with the odor control facility, we had indicated a preference that if we ever had the opportunity to comment on a permit, that we would always like to take the opportunity to do so. The draft statement that's part of this particular item was inserted here simply to represent what appropriate comments could be made should council choose to make those back relative to this particular permit being sought by UAJA.
Thank you.
Excellent.
So,
Thank you.
I would like to pull CA2D.
Okay. Any other items? If not, I will accept a motion to approve the consent agenda less CA2D.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Carla, CA2D.
All right, so this is regarding my comments about the casino, and I've talked to most of you, I think all of you individually, about a potential letter. So I just wanted it on the public record that I've decided to wait a little bit to send the letter, just for better timing, so that the letter that I sort of penned up so far addresses the casino should it be approved, not whether or not it should be approved. So after just kind of getting some feedback, I decided it would be best to wait until closer to the time, either to the decision time or to right after if it is approved. So I haven't quite decided yet, but I do appreciate the feedback so far, but I did, since Mr. Materna asked, I thought maybe I would follow up on that. And then, and that's actually kind of nice because it gives me a little bit more time.
Certainly.
So, yeah, I appreciate you guys helping me kind of get my head wrapped around that.
Excellent. Anything further on that item? If not, if you're comfortable.
Sure. I move to approve consent agenda item 2D.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Old business, wireless communication facilities, ordinance O-22-02. Lindsay.
Thank you. I just want to note that tonight we have Mr. Mike Roberts with us from the Cohen Law Group. He's on the Zoom screen. But then, just an introduction to my memo. If you recall, the last time we met and discussed wireless communications facilities, there were multiple comments from council. So between Adam and I, we came up with a list of to-do items and questions, and we forwarded those after another discussion with Mr. Bazan and Ms. Stilson. So those comments went to the Cohen Law Group, and they in turn responded. So tonight's meeting is a little different because we do have Mr. Roberts here, and he's been working on the past 4 drafts. We're now on draft 4 of the wireless communications facilities draft ordinance. And the ordinance and design manual have been attached with your agenda tonight, as well as the Q&A from Mr. Roberts. So I wanted to just do that quick presentation, quick overview, and then turn everything back over to council. If you have any further questions or that staff can answer, we'd be happy to do that. Otherwise, Mr. Roberts is here to give his opinion.
Okay.
That's all.
All right, so desire is us to walk down through the staff questions and Cohen answers?
Yeah, let's do that. So the first, we talked about enforcement tolls. The MPC has a regulation that you can fine up to $500 a day if someone's in violation of any land use ordinances. So in this case, that's how we use, that's the exact formula, I guess, we would use for our, any violations of the zoning ordinance. And that is acceptable to still do the same here with this ordinance.
Okay, let's get consensus as we go.
Great.
Any questions, comments, concerns with the information provided from council? Any questions?
Number 1, we're just going.
Number 1A,
Okay.
is this enough? Are we comfortable with the answer that we're receiving from staff and Attorney Roberts?
Yeah.
I'm hearing yes, I'm seeing north-south. Okay. Next one is, does the township need to include specific fines and penalties in our fee schedule specific to WCFs? Is this adequate? And they have provided an answer. Are we comfortable with that response and inclusion in our ordinance? Okay, great. Continuing on, confirm that WCF location can only occur in the right-of-way. Power connections, cable connections that may run from the right-of-way to a structure are not eligible WCF locations. And this says to be discussed. So is this a staff-led or attorney-led?
Yeah, I would say Mr. Roberts would probably have some better input on that than staff would.
Welcome.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. The reason for the to be discussed portion of my comment is just that I could use a little additional clarity as to what exactly is being asked here. The ordinance as presented before you addresses wireless communications facilities both inside and outside of the public rights of way. The only wireless communications facilities that under this ordinance are permitted inside of the public rights of way are small wireless communications facilities, which are also those that are governed by the new Pennsylvania Act 50, which is what kind of catalyzed this ordinance amendment project. But to the extent that there are kind of additional questions beyond that, I know that power connections and cable connections are mentioned. I'm not sure who exactly raised this comment, but I could just use some additional clarity to better respond to.
So we think that was, we were specifically talking about, if you have a cable line out at the street on a pole and it's coming in and connecting to your house, there would be no way that a small wireless communications facility would be able to be located somewhere along that line. without some?
No, so two points to that. One, in terms of a small wireless communications facility, any encroachment onto private property would be subject to either requiring an easement or a lease or some other property right to do that. That is not permitted by right necessarily in the ordinance absent permission from the landowner, whoever that would be. So they would have to actually, say it's Verizon, they would have to get some sort of property right from the landowner whose private property they would be encroaching on. A second point to that, in terms of what we call strand-mounted facilities, so those would be wireless boxes that are placed on existing cable in the public rights of way. Those are actually treated a bit differently than the small wireless communications facility under Act 50. Act 50 deems these to be micro wireless facilities. These are typically deployed by your Comcasts of the world, cable providers that have existing fiber in the public rights of way. And those are actually permitted by right absent an application of any kind. So under Act 50, they don't have to apply for the right to place those facilities on their own existing cable infrastructure in the public rights of way. The justification behind that, I can say it's not something our firm necessarily agrees with, but the justification from the state legislature was that these companies have existing cable franchise agreements with municipalities. They have an agreement and a right to enter the public rights of way, and they pay fees for that right already, and that this is kind of an extension of that cable franchise agreement rather than an additional use, because they are attaching to, again, exclusively their own cable, and they have to have a cable franchise agreement or some other agreement authorizing them to be at the rights of way as well.
Council, yeah, you understand what's been presented to us? Go ahead.
My only question is, do our cable franchise agreements recognize those micro communications facilities? Are they addressed at all?
Not specifically, other than the cable provider has the ability to utilize the right of way. That is the extent.
Without restriction?
Well,
That was my question.
Without restriction of that specifically, yeah.
correct.
And
They're-
they have pretty broad liberal to that, yeah. As long as they stay in the.
Existing chair of the, former chair of the
Former
Center Area
existing chair.
Cable Consortium is correct on that.
Yeah. So, and beyond that, Act 50 says they can. So
That was my, I
that
just
was a
wondered
double
if it was already in our cable franchise agreements, or if this was a newly created right, if you will.
Well, on a
With Act
good
50,
point,
I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Cohen worked our franchise agreement, so they have the most familiarity with it.
Just one quick point, with respect to the cable franchise agreement, just keep in mind that wireless communication facilities are not in any way, do not in any way contribute or can be charged. They're not part of the fees that are returned to the municipality in the form of the franchise fees that are paid by the cable operator. So in other words, any kind of wireless or phone apparatus that may be in the right-of-way being provided by an otherwise cable provider are not part of the franchise fees that are paid by that provider to the municipality.
Right, one of the biggest things that, of the negotiations, everybody wanted to beat up about internet service as part of it, but that's totally outside of that agreement and everything, which is.
So the franchise fees that are collected by municipalities are only on the cable element that is provided by that particular provider.
So Act 50 granted a new
Additional-
uncompensated
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, additional
that-
rights, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I wanted to be clear.
Yep.
as to what happened here.
But they named it micro, so it's fine.
Yeah,
They
right.
threw a micro before it.
Yeah, well, okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. Okay, staff is clear, good.
Yeah,
You know,
I think the question, thank you, Mike, that actually helped to clarify that, so appreciate it.
Next, incorporate more visuals into the ordinance and/or design manual. For example, rendering showing the height and permitted location of these facilities. Again, Mike's response was to be discussed. Mike, I'll let you expand on that, please.
Absolutely. The point to be discussed here really is simply asking what components of the ordinance and design manual the township would like to see reflected in either images, drawings, charts, whatever we may need to kind of provide that additional clarity. I know that there was some additional, I had a brief discussion with Lindsay earlier today as to what that would entail, and I believe it was relating primarily to size limitations and where facilities can be located with respect to the small wireless facilities in particular. And that is something that I would be happy to put together, but rather than kind of taking an initial stab at it without that clarity, I felt it best to discuss that with council beforehand, get some insight into what exactly you would like to see reflected by image in the design manual or the ordinance, and then we could work on putting those images together.
Okay, very good. Then, do you have anything to start us with, Lindsay, or should we start with council?
We are just thinking some examples that, Mark could look at them as the zoning officer and see those and think, okay, this is how these are supposed to look in the field. And I relayed that to Mike earlier today, so there's a start.
Okay. Is there anything specific council feels should be? Go ahead, Paul.
I just had a quick question. Are there other examples of visual-based ordinances that we know of or that Mike perhaps knows of that we could use as a reference?
We do have a few visuals in our existing wireless communications ordinance as it stands now, 3 or 4 figures. But those are just, the pictures of the images of the trees and the bell towers where you can hide.
Camouflaging.
Yeah.
Stealth, yeah.
I wasn't
Stealth
necessarily
requirements.
thinking in our own ordinance. I was thinking of looking more broadly at other
Right.
Oh, more visual
municipalities.
ordinances.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, we're the market leader for the center region, so everybody else is gonna have what we're gonna have. Mike, do you have any from other municipalities that you might be able to start us on a path?
I could certainly provide some examples. That they will be largely coming from larger municipalities that are kind of the national market leaders, to borrow your own phrase. But I could certainly give some examples as to what other municipalities are using, and then we can hone in on what level of depth the township would like to go to with these images. I mean, some municipalities have 40 pages of images that may be a bit overkill for the township, but I can send along some examples that you can look at and kind of determine what
Great.
exactly you would like to see.
Yeah, you and staff, I think can find the happy spot for that. So we'll put that back in you and staff's hands on that.
Okay.
Number 4, within the context of Acts 50 and or our ordinance, how is long-term safety of the WCF ensured determined? Other than physical safety of the structure, what provisions exist to determine operational safety and everything? And the response indicates proof of ongoing compliance must be submitted as part of the recertification, and tower similar and stuff. Was there any language added specifically to address that individual, or is it already in there? Prego.
This is pointing the language that was already there. I think it bears just a bit of additional discussion from my end in terms of specifically radio frequency emissions, as I know that this can be a concern for municipalities. And I do want to point out that in terms of local regulation of radio frequency emissions from wireless facilities generally, and this goes beyond the small wireless communications facility, but also to the, as the ordinance terms them, attached wireless communications facility and tower-based facility as well. All standards for radio frequency emissions and what is a permissible level of radio frequency emissions, those standards are established and enforced by the Federal Communications Commission exclusively. This comes from the 1996 Telecommunications Act, which, number one, tasked the FCC with coming up with these standards and promulgating those standards for acceptable radio frequency emissions levels. But the Act also states that local governments are not permitted to regulate the location, placement, or construction of wireless communications facilities based on the environmental or health effects of radio frequency emissions. So what municipalities are permitted to do is to require applicants to submit proof of their compliance with those FCC standards. We're permitted to review those standards. And for the small wireless communications facilities and the rights of way in particular, we're permitted to require what is allowed by Act 50, which is again a report showing compliance with those FCC standards and then recertification of these facilities on a 5-year basis. We are not permitted under federal or state law to impose our own radio frequency standards beyond that compliance with the FCC standards that have been around since shortly after the Telecommunications Act was enacted. I thought that kind of bear an explanation as a larger point, but in terms of ongoing certification, that is one area where we're a bit limited, or we're really pretty significantly limited in our authority. In terms of structural integrity, things like that, that will also be part of that recurring certification. Our hands are not quite as tied as they are there with the radio frequency emissions, but all of these kind of ongoing safety issues will need to be recertified prior to renewal of any of these permits during that 5-year term.
Okay. Did you have some? Yeah, please.
I do, yeah. So this, this question primarily came out of our line 142-ish, page 4. So section something 6. The applicant shall provide as part of a complete application and subsequently upon request after construction a statement from a qualified licensed and professional registered engineer. So it's the subsequently upon request after construction is the piece that that started this question for me. So if it is suspected that a WCF is not in compliance, can the township request a certification for radio frequency emissions?
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Could you?
Slow down, a little clearer.
It's 9:30.
I did get that, so. The township, certainly in instances where the township would suspect for whatever reason that a facility is not in compliance with the FCC standards, you absolutely can and should request this information.
Okay.
Not only that, but you should report this to the FCC as an enforcement tool as well. The consequences for knowingly exceeding the FCC standards and not remedying any type of excess, which in my experience is exceedingly rare, but the consequences of doing that are severe, up to a provider losing their FCC license, which would mean that they're no longer permitted to provide wireless service at that point. I mean, the FCC regulations take this very seriously, so it's certainly something that you can enforce if there is some suspicion that a given facility is exceeding the FCC levels, both via the township as well as at the federal level via the FCC.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. The other point I want to point out is that according to your response, currently in our ordinance, our tower-based WCFs and our attached WCFs do not require recertification after 5 years. That's the way I'm interpreting your comment, but we can add that if we choose to do so.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so the 5-year re-permitting comes out of the Act 50. Is that?
Yes, so
Yeah.
that 5-year term is set by Act 50
Thank you.
specific to small wireless communication facilities.
Great, so maybe that is a discussion point.
Yes. We want something in there. We want as much, as restrictive as we can have in there.
I would think so.
Right. Yeah, Paul?
A related question, is it possible to stipulate a period of time to bring a facility into compliance if and when the FCC standards change? So in other words, there's the potential that they will adjust based on lawsuits or legal challenges or whatever. Would we then be locked in if they had just been recertified the previous year for another 4 years of being out of compliance with current standards? Can we, by Act 50, write in something, a period of time that they would be allowed to, or required to bring it back into compliance, current compliance?
Current compliance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's an excellent question. I would say yes with a caveat, and the caveat being that, and this goes beyond Act 50 and beyond small facilities, throughout all of this, the FCC has the final say, right? So if the FCC were to change their standards, it is a near certainty that they would impose some sort of time limit for bringing facilities into compliance with their standards, and that time limit would probably be immediately, because a change to the standards would mean that the existing standards are posing some public health risk. So we can impose our own standard, but would need to have the caveat language in there stating that unless some other time frame is imposed by the FCC, that would differ from whatever we would impose.
I mean, that language doesn't sound onerous to, unless otherwise precluded by ordinance. I mean, anyway, I just think it would be a nice thing to have in there.
Okay.
A period of time.
Aaron, thoughts?
Just so I understand that, it sounds like the FCC has the final say, so even if we put that language in there, we would be trumped by the FCC anyways?
Potentially.
Potentially.
If
So the
more
only time that
restrictive.
language would help us is if the FCC was silent on,
Right.
When you needed to bring it into
okay, then
compliance.
yes.
Okay.
Or if
Yeah.
they
Yeah,
said
that's
2
fine.
years and we wanted it to be a single year, or
Well,
whatever.
theirs would, if they spoke on it at all,
I
it
see.
would
The
supersede
The only
us.
thing it comes, but that protects us if they are silent.
Yeah.
It
That's
gives
the
us,
case where our language would then.
our language would be
But in
applicable.
that case, they're not going to be silent, right? If they're changing a standard, they're not silent at all.
That's what we're hearing from them.
And so, when a regulation changes, there is always almost 100% of the time a timetable involved, or, you have to be in compliance within this.
Right.
And we could even revisit our ordinance at
Yeah.
that point, although we would be locked into the 5-year recertification
Correct.
period at that point, which would be changing the rules halfway through. So I wanted to bring it up because
No,
I
that's a
wasn't
good
even sure if it
question.
was allowed.
For sure.
I would, it's too easy to put in there, I think, and it covers the, FCC makes mistakes too. So I think if there's language that we could put in there that you would support, Mike, then I think we would ask that you do, that you share that, some type of.
Absolutely, and this, I think as a suggestion from my end, actually kind of taking this suggestion and expanding it out a little bit, in subsection A1 on page 3, we have a general standard of care requirement for all wireless communications facilities that requires kind of general compliance with any industry standards, safety codes, federal regulations, anything that effectively they would need to comply with for public health and safety reasons. I think inserting this type of language into this requirement covers us for radio frequency emissions because we do mention applicable regulations with the Federal Communications Commission, but also expands it out to any changes to other regulations that may have this sort of effect as well. So it's something that could capture radio frequency, but could also capture any other changes to these regulations, and we can apply that kind of same time frame to all of this. Again, with the caveat being unless some other time frame is prescribed by law.
I like that.
That sounds like a real good fix. Thank you.
What's our time frame?
I think we need some recommendations on it
Yeah.
from staff and legally from Mike.
Less than 5 years.
Yeah, less than 5 years. Yeah, you know.
Well, I mean, to Dustin's point, there's already going to be, if it comes, I know what the caveats are,
Yeah.
but, so if it's less than 5 years, I mean, Mike, is a reasonable expectation for that frequency adjustment 2 years, 3 years? No later, no more than,
Immediately?
or immediately?
I would say significantly shorter than that.
Okay.
A frequency adjustment like that really is a power issue. So you would kind of lower the power level supplying one of these facilities, and it can bring the emissions down in a kind of a linear fashion. So it would not be years, it would be months at the longest, I would say, for this. Again, I think Council's very accurate in stating that there is no scenario that I can fathom where the FCC would not impose a time frame. But as an attorney, I favor a belt and suspenders approach always. So certainly something that we can add. I would say a period of months, not years for these.
Yep.
3 to 6 months.
180 days.
Yeah.
Well, reasonable, you know, I'm comfortable with 6 months, but again, I wasn't looking for an answer. I know myself, I wasn't looking for an answer. I was looking for staff and Mike to provide a recommendation.
But look how fast we did that.
Did we? Okay.
Was that the belt or the suspenders?
Was that the belt or the suspenders?
Well, you just say within 90 days, that's quick.
Sure. Well, we'll get an answer on that one. Number 5.
What,
Oh.
yeah, so for, we're still
We're
at
in 4B.
4B, oh, I'm sorry.
Or 4A.
I did have a question on the second paragraph of 4A, maybe I missed it. but
Okay.
When I read that, it seems as though for the tower base and attached, that we can do less than 5 years? Is that how I'm
Yes,
reading? Yeah, okay.
correct.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
That's a staff question then.
Yeah, Mark, right now, our tower based, are we one and done?
Yes, and I think keep it consistent with the regulations under Act 50. We could have the tower based every 5 years as well.
Or was
That-
suggested possibly less, but I mean.
That would be good for consistency.
For current conditions though, we're a one and done permitting, they
Right.
don't have to come back.
Yeah, so this would only apply, anything with this would only apply to what happens from enactment forward. We can't go back, sort of like
Sure.
with the,
Right.
you know, non-conforming structures.
Yep.
We know.
Yep.
Good.
But, so staff's recommendation would be 5 years. Is council comfortable with that? It's a lot better than what we have right now.
I think 5 years makes sense. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, because you don't want to create an
Anything-
onerous task on
Exactly,
staff as
yeah.
well. But
Well, I mean, I guess the biggest point there is simply the one that Mark made, it's consistent, so the small wireless is the
Yep.
5, the tower would be
Great.
the 5, unless there was compelling reason to do something less, and I don't know what that is right now, so.
Okay, just staff and Mike, give it some
Yep.
thought, but I think our initial is consistency, 5 years. So,
Well, I mean, unless you want to drive a different type of landscape, right? If you want to make it, if we want to drive and say, look, we want to see more small WCFs, right? You know, just as an example, maybe you make the certification, recertification on tower-based a little more onerous.
I think, aren't there two separate kind of uses though, aren't
They
they?
are.
yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
huge. Yeah, huge difference, I think.
And when it says attached WCFs, what's the definition of that exactly? Tower-based WCFs and attached WCFs?
So,
Attached would be attached to an existing structure.
Okay. Not new.
So it's not bolted on the side of a commercial building.
that is attached.
Actually, the one near Miss Stilson's house, that fell under attached on an existing pole.
Yeah. A lot of times you see them on roofs, and everything, whereas a tower is a specific use, standalone use for that. This is, they're stuck on the side
Yeah,
of
the
some other
towers, like,
structure.
picture your, 10 years ago, the cell tower.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah,
I know the
yeah.
Yeah, I was just talking about the attached.
Right,
Got
yeah,
it.
yep. Is that, you good with 4A then? Are we good through
Yeah.
4A? 4B, I think we kind of touched on that as well. Anything extra on 4B?
No, well, yes.
Okay.
So the second paragraph of 4B says, for tower-based, oh, sorry, we're
That's
good,
the
right,
five,
that's
yeah.
what we just did.
Yeah. 5 years or whatever Mike and staff.
And then I
come
wrote,
up
yeah, let's mimic the small wireless.
Right,
Yeah.
cool. 5, historic buildings or districts. Any questions? There was some language amended as a result of that one. Is council comfortable with how that was handled, or are there further questions for staff or Mike?
I just have a quick comment that I've already sent to Lindsay, just about the map that was included with the agenda. It was not labeled like with a big question mark on it. It's specifically labeled like this is the map for small wireless facilities. So I just wanted to make sure that we clear that up. I'm all about the way things are labeled. So
Yeah, that was intended to be an example.
I know what it was.
Yeah,
But it was
it's a good
included with the
point.
packet, and
Understood.
it's according to,
So titling, if it is to be included in the final ordinance, is that what the?
well, it won't
question
because
was?
it's incorrect.
Okay,
So I just wanted to make sure that I'm making a public statement that the map included with the agenda packet, we
Okay.
have found out is not accurate.
Right.
That's my point.
And likewise, it's for demonstration purposes only.
Exactly.
It will not be part of the
Okay.
final ordinance.
okay.
Right, but if somebody were to be looking
Exactly.
through our agenda packets and were to find it, it would, without, I just want it in the minutes
Yeah,
that,
it's an excellent point.
That's all.
And
It
in
is not-
fact, I think that's something that we should probably ask our GIS technician to reach back in and update that and identify it clearly as for demonstration and discussion purposes only.
right.
So that there's beyond any, so there's no confusion whatsoever.
I appreciate that.
It was simply to try to
Sure.
help visualize what this might begin to look like should these things start to
Yeah.
appear.
It's another tool in our evaluation of this potential ordinance. When we get to a actual ordinance, we will not see it there. This is what we're hearing. Okay.
Question,
Yes, sir.
is that map the one that Roberts did with regard to protected places around the historic district?
Yes.
So what you're now saying is that's not accurate?
Oh, Lindsay has something else to add.
We did it in-house. It was nothing that came from Cohen.
Oh, I thought, okay.
Yeah, we just, read in the ordinance, there's 200-foot buffer, so we wanted to show you an example of what that could mean. After further discussions with Mr. Roberts, we came to understand that that really can't be the case,
Right.
because we can't really outzone these things like this potentially would.
They have to be, that was one of our questions that we brought up in our meeting, was how can they simultaneously be not allowed in the historic zoning district and have to be allowed in all zoning districts? And that's the question that we received.
The answer,
The
yep.
answer
Yep.
was they have to be allowed in every
Yeah.
zoning
Right.
district.
So it's
That was my
actually, it's been
confusion reading
fixed.
this.
It's been fixed in the language of the ordinance, which is, so that was the reason
Yep.
Mr. Bazan and I asked the question.
Sure.
I don't want to belabor this, and if we've answered it, fine. But a historic district is not a zoning district.
Correct. There's, the language in the ordinance states any historic, something listed on the historic register or districts, so historic buildings or districts. And remember back from our discussions with historic structures, we have the, you know, the Lamont as a census designated place, and then we have the historic district established by the Lamont, by the LBA in the 70s, and then we have our village zoning district established still in the 70s, but that district, they're mixed. The zoning
There's
falls
an
within-
underlying zoning district.
Yeah, because it's smaller, it's a smaller boundary within the bigger historic district boundary.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay.
yep, thank you.
Well, so are we clear? This,
I think maybe
Yeah.
Mike might be able to help us in understanding that.
Help us.
Absolutely. And this touches really on two issues. One is the Act 50 requirement that small, and this is limited to small wireless communications facilities inside the public rights of way only.
right.
That they be permitted in all zoning districts by right. So if a historic overlay district covers the entirety of a zoning district, that is essentially a de facto way of prohibiting them in a given zoning district. There's also a question of what's called effective prohibition. This comes actually from the Telecommunications Act back in 1996, which says that local governments are not permitted to prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the provision of wireless service. That standard was modified by the FCC back in 2018 to mean materially inhibiting a provider's ability to provide service in any given area of a municipality. So if we are imposing a requirement of some kind that amounts to a prohibition of
Nope, we lost Mike.
a large portion of the municipality, large portion of the township, that could bring rise to effective prohibition challenges as well, because it is not in itself a facial prohibition, but when enforced, it effectively means that no wireless facilities are permitted in a significant portion of the township. So both of those issues arise specifically regarding small wireless facilities in the public rights of way. For anything outside the rights of way, the 200-foot radius is in effect, absolutely. And I know for small wireless communications facilities, any of those that would be in the public rights of way in any historically sensitive area, so historic district within a certain radius of a historic property, we are allowed to impose additional design requirements so they are not visually obtrusive in any manner, that they are designed to blend into the character of that area. That's something that's reflected in the design manual, but that's permitted by Act 50 as well. We can't keep those facilities out of large portions of the municipality, whether that be, facially prohibiting them or imposing this type of requirement that wouldn't have the effect.
Correct.
So real quick, Mike, we're talking about a several block area of a historic district. I would assume that would not meet the test of a significant portion of the township. Would that?
Well, this is 200 feet from.
Around the entire boundary of the registered historic
Even
district.
so, you're still talking only several blocks.
Yeah.
In terms of size in the overall.
What if we gave some scenarios? I mean, I know that buffer covers the whole zoning, the village zoning district. So that would really be the only one we're putting out.
Okay, I'm gonna chime in that it sounds like staff and Attorney Roberts has some work to do on
that's fine.
that.
We'll have to work on that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Very
Yeah,
good.
and if, just to add to that, if the buffer doesn't work, which I hope it does, like that's ideal, right? Not even the buffer, the historic district and buffer, if that doesn't work, then the stealth requirements, do we have those in there?
Yeah, it sounds like we can attach additional when it comes to historic districts.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I didn't remember seeing those for the historic districts.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Specifically, but maybe they are in there.
Are you allowed to place restrictions on the density of these? You know, how many within so much of an area?
That's a Mr.
Mike,
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
I
from
don't
Mr.
believe we are.
I never saw it in the
Yeah,
ordinance.
we really are not. So in terms of, what that would be regulating really would be, what are considered to be either, propagation or radio frequency decisions, using radio frequency in a different fashion, a provider's determinations of what they need to cover, where they need to deploy to cover a given area. That would be something that we are, again, not permitted to regulate. In terms of, again, small wireless communications facilities in the public rights of way. Anything else, so towers outside the rights of way, attached wireless communications facilities outside the rights of way, we do have the ability to regulate the number and the density to a degree. There are a few kind of wrinkles to that, most notably which are what are known as eligible facilities requests. Not to dive too deeply into kind of a tangential issue, but what eligible facilities requests permit is for a wireless provider to either add facilities or modify facilities on an existing wireless communications facility. So if there's an existing antenna on a rooftop, or if there's an existing cell tower, federal law permits by right and requires mandatory approval of additional facilities up to a certain size limit. So effectively, it's a very long definition, but effectively, additional providers or the same provider can increase that facility size by about 10% to add additional antennas onto an existing facility. So we can limit to a degree other facilities outside the public rights of way, but there are situations where providers could kind of add additional facilities by utilizing the eligible facilities request process. I will note that that is not an infinite process. So once a facility is increased by 10%, it stops. It doesn't allow each subsequent provider an additional 10%, which is often the question we get. So a long-winded way of saying, yes, we can limit the density of those facilities outside the rights of way, but there are ways where providers would be able to add a few additional antennas within those size limits.
There is a clause in the ordinance as well that when you're applying for these permits, you can't do more than one or 20. So one type or then 20 others within a 30-day period. So one provider can't come in and apply for, 100 different small wireless facilities to put in place within 30 days. So there is a limit there as well.
You're tying it to time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's how it's allowable.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's just for your caseload, I think, more so
Yeah, I
than
was gonna
anything.
say.
Is your concern multiple small wireless facilities side by side by side?
Absolutely.
And I think we do have the authority, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, to require co-location. So, seven providers at this table, if you came in and got that first location, I could say, no, you all have to attach onto his pole. Is that not correct, Mike? As far as,
That's correct, yeah. So, and that goes for any new structure. So for small wireless facilities where an applicant's seeking a new pole, or new towers outside the rights of way as well, the applicant has to show that it is not possible to co-locate on some existing structure, whether that be an existing pole, a rooftop, something where they're not installing a new support structure. That has to be shown to the township before they're permitted to even seek approval for a new pole or a new tower.
that help, Dustin?
Yep, thanks.
Excellent. Okay, so 5, we've got some more work coming back
Right,
to us.
right.
6, definitions should be consistent with definitions established in the existing zoning ordinance, i.e. right-of-way. Do we have the ability to define other related terms associated? And Mike provides an answer that, you have to be very careful of those, basically. Does council need clarification on that? Go ahead, Carl.
Well, maybe,
Or,
I asked Lindsay a follow-up question. When this came out of our meeting with Mr. Bazan, and I don't recall these terms, it was a while ago. I don't recall these terms specifically being the ones we were asking about. I recall it more being the right-of-way, the definition of right-of, like, I'm vague on my memory, but I was wondering if maybe Jean recalled that. There was something about a definition that might be...
Yeah, there were some inconsistencies between their definition of right-of-way and our definition of right-of-way within our streets and sidewalks ordinance, zoning ordinance. These few that we noted here were specifically from Jean's note 9.
Okay.
That came in, so those were those definitions. But yeah, I believe we talked about just making that right-of-way definition consistent. Mike, do you recall that?
Mike Roberts?
yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay, I do not, and I'm not sure that we, just looking through now, that we define right-of-way in the draft that I provided or the design manual. So typically, and that would be the case here, the ordinance would reflect the definitions of the larger zoning code. So we placed these definitions into the larger zoning definitions of 200-7. So I don't believe, and if your drafts reflect differently, please let me know.
I
don't believe in the right of way.
You've helped jog my memory. I do believe this goes back to the question about for instance, the question about the wire going to the house and the right-of-way that allowed. So I do believe that this was a concern of Jean's, of our definition of right-of-way being relatively broad, talking about not just the right-of-way that this small wireless communications facility is discussing, but a whole lot of right-of-ways,
Well, if we're referring to, as Mr. Roberts has just suggested, we're relying on the overall zoning code definition of right-of-way, and that overall zoning, it's not specific to WCFs. It is specific to right-of-ways.
Yeah.
So the question is there going to be a need to refine the definition of right-of-way for the purposes of WCF? Because
it's very broad.
Well, because we really can't, in the broader zoning code,
of course,
redefine that term of right-of-way. But if we have the ability, Mr. Roberts, perhaps we can and should consider the definition, a different definition of right-of-way for WCF purposes.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Glad we got there.
let me ask that may be, again, taking a suggestion and kind of expanding it outward, and this is something we've done in other municipalities as well. Would the township prefer that we kind of place all wireless communications facility specific definitions in the wireless communications facility section, or otherwise single them out in the larger definition section? So what we often do is say, for example, where we have now 200-39.1A as general, we would replace that instead with definitions, push everything down a section, and establish definitions that are specific exclusively to 200-39.1 as a section.
Yeah.
That way, there's no overlap between any of these terms. I don't think that there would be much in here that may interfere with other areas, but it would prevent any sort of confusion where we would redefine or add a definition that unbeknownst to all of us having this discussion, maybe utilized somewhere else in the code to kind of a deleterious effect if we were to change it. So that's an option that we have as well, if that would be more palatable to the township, just singling these out for wireless communication facilities.
I think that makes a lot of
Generally,
sense.
it seems like more work, but in this case, it seems to work better for us to do that.
I think so too.
It's
You agree?
consistent
Yeah.
with what
Yeah.
we've done in the past too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the hard time, oh, no, this is right away, or, it's hard, but it is hard. There's not a way to make it simple, and so if it's contained within that ordinance, it's actually easier, better, more efficient, and everything. So, yeah, I would say that staff and Attorney Roberts need to work on some
Yes.
definitions. Mark, I look at Mark, it'll help you a lot.
And it would take away any ambiguity with
Sure.
conflicts. For the purpose, following definitions will apply
For the purposes of this section.
for the
yeah.
purposes of section.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think it's an excellent, it's gonna be a time saver for staff, and it will avoid confusion,
Yep,
so.
Okay.
I think we have consensus on that. Seth,
Question, comment?
if you will come to the lectern, please, Mr. Bazan.
Okay. It's just about this definition. actually.
Sure, please.
All right.
We can do this. Gene,
Oh, okay, thanks.
I was gonna do it. Seeing that even be okay? I was asking him.
Oh, sure,
We're gonna
thanks.
be,
Right. The question really is, in this reconsidering of the definition, are we talking about excluding such utility easements as that we were talking about? That should not be a subset of our new ROW for the WCF. Is that what I understand now?
That's a great follow-up, Gene. Mr. Roberts, did you hear that?
I did not quite catch that.
Yeah,
If you could repeat it
so,
for me.
right, so
Okay,
this is,
Go ahead.
okay, so the question is, the new right-of-way definition specifically under the WCF ordinance, will that preclude right-of-ways such as utility right-of-ways?
So it will not and it cannot, frankly, under Act 50. So we would have to use the Act 50 right-of-way now, because Act 50 governs these facilities in public rights-of-way, and that specifically includes utility easements in their definition. It includes public roadways, highways, streets, sidewalks, alleys, utility easements, or similar properties. The only thing it specifically excludes are federal interstate highways. So we would, in order to comply with Act 50, have to utilize the Act 50 definition. Otherwise, we would be violating Act 50 at that point if we are excluding things that are included in the Act 50 definition.
No.
Okay, but hang on, but that means that we have to include the very things we don't want, namely utility easements.
I think the confusion here, I don't know if we could throw something extra in here. I recall from our conversations, Mr. Roberts, that Mr. Bazan was concerned about easements such as the water line running from the street to his house. Does that mean this is an easement that they could go in the middle of my front yard and this easement on top of my water line and place one of these?
Or to take a large example, there's a major water line that the township has that goes along White Hill Drive, cuts across between several properties before it goes up to the storage facility at the top of Mount Nittany Road. That's a public utility easement. So under Act 50, that would seem to allow placement by some provider of an SWF anywhere along that easement.
That's a great question and not a fact pattern that I have run into yet under this. I would say that in terms of enforcement, this would be an enforcement question for the township whenever an application for something like that would come in. I do not see the definition as expanding out that far. Typically, right-of-way placement is kind of sidewalk, street side right-of-way placement for these facilities. I have never personally seen one expand into that type of utility easement just from an infrastructure standpoint. the required power supply and cable or fiber wouldn't be there. It would require some pretty substantial build out. But that said, I mean, it would be a situation that you do have these easements, we should be prepared for in some fashion. I don't know if it's one that we can prepare for via definition, if the very term used in the Act 50 definition corresponds with the term that the township uses for these types of easements, or I think goes beyond the township use. But that, to me, would be really an enforcement question that we'd have to take on a case-by-case basis more than anything. If an applicant were to apply for a small wireless facility, trying to argue that such an easement would be a right-of-way, effectively we would need to mount a defense as to why it is not a right-of-way as utilized by Act 50. I realize probably not the answer you look for, but I don't see a way, given the Act 50 definition, that we can kind of carve out something that would be called a utility easement and claim that it's not a utility easement on a broad basis. We would really have to take those on a case-by-case basis.
Well, let me try this another way. What does Act 50 mean by the phrase utility easement?
Okay, it's pretty clear we don't have these answers tonight.
That's a question.
I understand.
Good.
We still have some work with 6. I'd ask staff if they could work with Attorney Roberts and also clue in Mr. Bazan and see if we can get a definitive answer on that. But we're not going to have that answer tonight.
Yeah, it almost seems like this is something, if and when this situation arises, be it in College Township or anywhere else in the Commonwealth, it's going to take a court to decide what the original intention was.
Agreed.
And this may be fruitless to try, you'll never buckle this down until it goes through the court.
Yeah, and then when you think you have it buckled down, then the court will tell you it's
I
different
guess,
belt.
I would assume that council would be willing to pursue, if someone wanted to put it on a water line easement going to the water tank.
That didn't.
College Township would be willing to expend the funds
Exactly.
to get the clarification.
Correct. I know I would. But again, we have work to do in 6, so we'll work with that. 7, word facade should be replaced with front yard or similar term to mean the area of the right-of-way directly in front of building. The design manual has been revised accordingly. Is everybody comfortable with that change? Go ahead.
Yeah, so this relates directly to my initial question. The way that Lindsay interpreted it was not accurate to my initial question, but it led to kind of a nice outcome, I thought. Changing to front yard, which is great in my opinion. But while I have Mr. Roberts on the line, I would like to ask, so line 247-ish, there we are, section 2 of the design manual is titled New Wireless Support Structures. Just so that we're all on the same page, co-location, as we've discussed, is not a new wireless support structure, and it can happen. Co-location isn't just a wireless facility being added to a spot with another wireless facility. It's also a wireless facility being added onto an existing pole that's a utility pole for another reason. So my question was, can a small wireless facility be mounted on an existing pole in the facade area or now front yard of a house?
So under the current draft, yes, it can. And the reason that it is that way, at least for now, is that I would require more input from the township in terms of the feasibility of adding that requirement to co-located wireless communications facilities. And the reason for that, again, goes back to that idea of effective prohibition, right? So it would depend on what opportunities there are outside of the front facade area in any given portion of the township. How close homes are together. These are questions for you all who are far more, intimately familiar with the realities of the township's layout. But the danger case here, I guess so to speak, would be large areas where homes are so close together that this requirement would mean you can't put up any
Effective
small wire
Effectively
facilities. So I defer to your judgment as to, you know, whether any of those large areas exist. I'm happy to work with staff in terms of, you know, providing my assessment of any of those areas that you would bring up. But I would need more input from the township as to whether you think any area like that would exist. And then we can kind of take a look at the feasibility of adding this requirement to co-locations as well.
Adam, go ahead.
I was only going to say that typically existing poles are not located in front yards. They are, however, located in the right-of-way immediately adjacent to front yards. Is that still your question?
Oh, I have a front pole in my front yard, like,
Right.
I mean, a front pole.
Right.
So,
But it's
they're
in
not,
the right-of-way.
well, right, I have a gigantic right-of-way, as you know.
Exactly.
Yes, but we're not talking about in the front yard, we're talking about in the we've changed it now, so along the front yard.
Right.
In the facade of the house. So that's specifically, like, my question goes all the way back to when it said facade, like right in front, in that space, right in front of the house. So for those unfortunate houses that already have a stinking pole in their front yard, can it also now be co-located on?
I just wanted to be sure, yeah, so the distinction for me is it's a pole, it's still in a right-of-way.
Correct.
But it's still
It's in front of a
that,
house.
it's in front of the house.
Yeah, and I know
Gotcha.
we have a few of them. I think that's a great thing for Mr. Roberts to talk to staff about, because I would say actually that our more built-out neighborhoods don't have poles at all. And so it's more of the kind of older neighborhoods or ruraler neighborhoods that do have poles, and I do think that there would be room for them to locate it into a spot that's not in front of a home, because those houses are a little bit more spread out. But that's just my general.
I might be able to ask a follow-up that I think will satisfy you. Mr. Roberts, with the ordinance that you've put together and our ability to, I believe this ordinance does give us some discretion in where it's located. So what I would ask you, is there enough in this ordinance if somebody wanted to put a small wireless facility on a pole directly in front of someone's house, would I, as the zoning officer, have the authority to say, no, there's another pole 150 feet down the road that will give you the coverage. That is where I want it placed. Will this give me that much latitude? I know the ordinance does allow us to regulate placement to a certain degree. Would the language in this ordinance be able to address a situation like Ms. Stilson?
And I'm not my neighbor has a pole in front of their house too.
Yeah,
I have a wireless facility already. Like, I'm not talking about for myself.
No,
For
but
Mary,
address
the
your
concern that
question.
you expressed.
Right.
Yeah, so it would depend on, frankly, in the current draft, the location of the windows of the home at this point. The language that we would rely upon for that is on, and forgive me, there are no page numbers in my draft, it is section 3.1H, which states that no antenna placement can materially impair light, air, or views from adjacent windows. So meaning that you can't install a facility in a way that would materially interfere with, you know, folks' windows, looking out of your home and seeing this eyesore of an antenna there. So that would really be the language that we would rely upon for relocation. That is reflected also in the same larger section, subsection 2J as well for related equipment. Again, kind of belt and suspenders approach there. But that kind of works in conjunction with that facade or front yard language to keep things out of people's front yards interfering with their windows, things like that. That would be the language we rely upon. If there are scenarios where the window question would not come into play, I would certainly encourage us to explore any other language that we could add there within the confines of Act 50 to provide a bit more ability there. But again, this is a kind of my deferring to the township as to what the reality of these areas actually is.
So he's talking about lines 156, 157 in the design manual. Which is OB 1B.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is there's potential feedback from staff to Attorney Roberts to determine if we need more restrictive or can
Yeah, I
have
think
more
we
restrictive
need to-
language.
We'll need to follow up and confirm
Okay.
that what we have in the design manual is sufficient for the purposes to address the issue.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay?
If I can ask one question of council quickly, on a comment that was made that I think may point out a sensible change to be made on the issue of the use of front yard. As we define it in the design manual, it does state extending from the lot line to a structure. And I don't know if this is the point that was being made, but we prohibit the placement of new wireless support structures, specifically in the front yard. I think some clarifying language could be added there, stating in the right of way, directly in front of the front yard. And I'm not sure who exactly raised that point, but that may address that issue in terms of clarifying. We are talking about the right of way in that front yard area, not the front yard area itself, where small wireless facilities would not be permitted anyway.
So that would be a definition item laying out, when we're saying front yard in the gist of this ordinance, we're saying.
Would it include the right of way?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And that would help, clarifications, again, the rest of the ordinance, or the rest of our zoning ordinances and stuff like that. When we say front yard, we mean this, and.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
Has to be
okay,
separate.
okay, good.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to belabor the point, but with the portion that you pointed out in section H, or section 3.1H, is that part about new wireless? Oh, that's just about the new wireless support structures, and the other one's just about antenna standards. Okay, so it's not
Yeah.
redundant.
3.1H would apply to anything, co-location, replacement, or new structure. Simply the existence of the antenna itself will be the gating factor for 3.1H.
Okay, I appreciate you pointing that out. That actually does, that resolves my concern. I'm fine if staff wants to think a little harder about it, but that's.
I'm gonna say that I think we do need the definition, front yard, we all understand what we're saying by that.
That for sure. I'm saying
Okay.
my initial
Right,
question
right.
about co-location in the facade area.
Good.
Okay. 8, does a clause exist that states each WCF is required to further comply with PUC FCC regulations? The revised language in that, does that meet that concern of council? I see one thumb, two thumbs, a nod. Eric's still with us. Okay. So I think we can check 8 off. So if I go back through in our list of questions for this evening, from 3, we need some work on visuals, and staff is going to work with Attorney Roberts on that. 4B, we want to add some language in for permit term. 5, we have some work overall.
Yeah, historic district
on the
versus
historic
village
districts.
district,
Exactly.
the overlap.
Yep.
Right.
And some of, maybe.
And historic buildings, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if some of that might spill over into definitions as well, but there's work on 5. There's also work on 6 in that we're gonna probably add a definitions section. And I know I heard right away is one of them, front yard is another one, and staff and will definitely work, whatever makes the enforcement of the ordinance better. 7, I think we covered under the definition with front yard, and then 8, we checked off. Paul, did you have something?
Just something that I let pass earlier. On number 5, there may be something in the design manual that we may want to look at for historic district. That could be another element of number 3, I guess.
Good deal. Good deal. Okay. Does staff have enough new work on this one?
Yeah, thanks, I'm really.
Yeah, thank you.
5. Job
No,
security.
It was good the way that you went through, so thanks for that.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Mr. Bazan, you had provided us, and we'd included in our consent agenda, a 9-page document. I'll be very honest, my day job did not allow me to review that with the clarity that I should have.
I appreciate that.
So, as you've heard, this will be back again, and it will give us the opportunity to review the document that you provided.
I
And
have provided a 5-minute summary.
I don't think I'm prepared for that. I apologize, but I don't think
Okay.
I'm prepared for that.
All right.
I would like to review your document and then go through and hear yours and see where those jive for me. That's my preferred method. I'll go back to,
May I ask one question of Mike?
absolutely.
Based on something that was in Mr. Bazan's,
Okay.
if that's okay, or
Sure.
I could wait, since he's here.
No, if it's.
No, he's here.
If we have,
Okay,
yes,
all right,
absolutely.
thank you. Mike, quick question. In Mr. Bazan's submission, something caught my eye. It was a suggestion to control either the input power or the output power of a small wireless communications facility. By my reading, there's nothing in Act 50 that prohibits that, but I would assume that that would then intrude on the FCC's regulation standards. Is that a correct assumption? I realize you're not looking at the same document that I am, but would there be any latitude for us to control input power or output power? It would seem to me that that would just directly impact the strength of the signal, which we're not allowed to regulate.
Yeah, so beyond I think the issue of interfering with, again, those decisions with capacity that are covered by Act 50 as well, to the extent, again, that a facility complies with the FCC standards, that's really all the say we have with respect to radio frequency emissions. So if a proposed facility or an existing facility is within those limits, and we try to further reduce the emissions for whatever reason that would be, that would be in violation of the Telecommunications Act at that point, because that facility has shown that it complies with the FCC regulations, which are the governing regulations in terms of radio frequency emissions.
That's what I thought you were going to say. I just had to ask the question.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions while we have Mike?
I have one.
One, go.
Thank you, sorry. I just had a quick question about the insurance, which was another one of Mr. Bazan's comments. Specifically, our ordinance states a certificate of insurance is required, but Mr. Bazan suggests a possibility of requiring an insurance policy carried by the wireless facilities operator. Just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
I would be happy to discuss that further. I mean, a certificate of insurance shows proof of the insurance policy. So I'm not sure what that additional documentation would be that the township is looking for, but I would be happy to look into it if there could be some additional clarity provided as to what exactly is being sought there.
Okay, I think that's a longer conversation than for right this second, so.
Yeah, and I know there are some other insurance-related questions that I'd be happy to look into as well.
Right. Insurance is not an uncomplicated matter, so we definitely want to get an opportunity to review that. I did see Tanya has her hand up.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. We're
Okay,
sorry for keeping Jean out so late.
That's okay. I'm sorry that I haven't participated in 2 months. I'm actually derailed by a family emergency. I haven't even been in town for 2 months. It's not over yet, but I really appreciate the council taking this matter seriously. I'm grateful for Michael Roberts joining us tonight and adding further input. And I just wanted to briefly comment that while the FCC is meant to enforce their regulations, they actually have no enforcement arm. There's no one policing anything unless someone independently reports a problem. And that's very difficult because the public is at a great disadvantage because the equipment that's being released now has multiple frequencies, you know, everything from say 3 gigahertz and 22 gigahertz antennas, all rating at different powers. And so who is going to go out there for a bunch of co-located antennas and look at the greater impact of all that? Who's got the equipment that's sophisticated enough to be able to give a true assessment of what the public is being exposed to? That's been one of the issues I raised before, and it remains of interest to me here, and for public health and safety matters. So I just wanted to raise that, but I'm really grateful you guys are taking this seriously. I realize it's going to come back again, and hopefully we can iron out more of these matters.
Well, I think as a council and as a staff, we have made a commitment where we have leeway, we will utilize it and err on the side of caution. Unfortunately, government bodies above us have said on certain matters, we don't have leeway. And those are our challenges, and we have to rely on our subject matter experts, like Attorney Roberts, to help us guide this minefield and everything. But we certainly appreciate your and Jean's input in this, and we know that's not done yet. Again, I've got my homework. I got a 9-pager to get done here soon. Everything I'll try and do a better Cliff Notes version than you did at the last meeting, Jean, but I'm just saying.
Thank you all.
But thank you. Anything further on this matter? Needless to say, we will be seeing this again.
I
It's
actually
chicken.
do, I know. My question actually has to do with that very thing. Is there any reason is there some way we can protect ourselves should an application come? We've been dragging this out for a long time now, I know, and I know there's some concern by staff. If somebody should come forth with an application and we do not yet have an ordinance on the books, how can we cover ourselves? Is that by putting this forward to a public hearing and then it's pending, even if we are coming back at it?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, if you scheduled a public hearing, we can advertise the ordinance, but we have certain advertising limitations, right, Jen? And I'm trying
You have to have a finalized ordinance.
You gotta have something to show the public. It's
Yeah,
not, there's
you
a
gotta have
document that has to
something
be
finished, and we're
reviewed.
not finished.
Well,
to
and
have a
so I
public
think
hearing.
that, I think we're gonna remain in that limbo.
Okay,
then,
I just
because
wanted to make sure.
I think one of the things, and the reason you had a completely clean copy of draft version
Yeah.
number 4 in the ordinance was if in fact we felt there were subtle enough changes that needed to be
De
made.
minimis.
That we were gonna, de minimis changes that needed to be made, where we could go ahead and do the advertisement. We're not there yet, so, yeah, we're gonna remain in this limbo for a period of time. You know, fortunately, we've not been approached to this point. By the time we're able to get back here and possibly set the public hearing and have a final document to review, we'll still avoid any applications.
Right. And
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Apologies, if I may quickly jump in on that point. I just want to bring one thing to the council's attention and staff's attention as well. All wireless communications facilities applications have what are known as shot clocks, similar to a basketball shot clock, where there are strict timeframes in which municipalities have to perform certain actions in terms of review and decision on the applications. Those are in effect no matter what we have on the books. They are reflected in the ordinance, but there is a time frame for each type of application, and a pretty burdensome one for small wireless communications facilities, where we do have to perform a review and notify the applicant if there's anything missing in terms of documentation, or if there's anything that would render the application incomplete. The reason I bring this up is that if an application is received for any wireless communications facility, but particularly a small wireless communications facility, please reach out to us and make sure that we review that application quickly, whether we assist staff or whatever you would like from us. But just to make sure that the township is complying with that shot clock timeframe, because if we don't, we forfeit certain rights, the ability to request that missing information. And if we were to go so far as to missing the ultimate deadline for decision on the application, whether that be approval or denial, for certain facilities, the attached and tower-based facilities, that renders the application approved, and the applicant can just move forward with getting their permits. And for small wireless communication facilities, it means the township is going potentially to be sued by the applicant, because their relief for small wireless communication facilities is via federal court, or they can seek a deemed approved approach under Act 50 as well. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that if any applications are received, we do need to act quickly on those, whether we have the ordinance in place or not. It's just something that I wanted to make sure we have.
Sure, we're used to, yeah, we're used to that with our saldo stuff, and we're used to the shot clock and everything. We're very conscientious about that. So, but thank you for the offer to be involved in that. Anything else? Does staff have everything that they need to keep moving forward?
I believe we do. I mean, I think we've captured everything that we've reviewed here this evening. We have some work to do with Mr. Roberts. Mike, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate your patience this evening, helping us through, but I think it is very valuable and very much appreciated.
Council, any parting shots?
Parting shots?
Yes.
Well, I'll take a parting shot.
Okay.
This is what we get when industry lobbyists get the right legislation.
It is true.
Sorry, it's late.
It's a good point.
Doesn't change the facts of that, no.
Hey, but a serious question, should the application come in and it's deemed incomplete, the shot clock therefore has not started, correct?
Correct.
So if an application came in tomorrow, staff reviewed it and determined it, staff and Cohen Group deemed it incomplete application, the shot clock has not started, right? Just like any land development plan, it's not.
Right, I think we have a time frame to allow them to resubmit it, and then the shot clock starts again.
Restart.
Right, well, that wasn't my question. My question was, the shot clock is deferred.
It doesn't start till the
until
complete
they-
application is in hand.
And it's complete.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay.
So if I could provide, excuse me,
Tell me there's
It's
another
a bit-
protection in there for the industry on that one, and
Yeah,
I'll
there is.
leave right now, so.
There is not, it's simply a bit more complicated. So the first time the application is deemed incomplete, we have to, A, notify the applicant, so we have to provide them notice that the application is incomplete.
Fair enough.
That will reset the shot clock that first time. If it is subsequently deemed incomplete again, so they resubmit, they're still missing something, and we notify them it's incomplete again, it pauses the shot clock until they resubmit and picks up where it left off at that point. That is for the small wireless communication.
Well, they didn't miss much of that, did they?
They make it about as complicated as possible for these shot clocks. That's why I stress it so much, is that you can get into trouble pretty easily with them. But the important thing is we notify the applicant of the incompleteness. For small wireless communication facilities, it's a 10 business day window, so it's pretty quick. So it's certainly something that we want to make sure we're on the ball for. But to answer the question, it will reset the shot clock the first notice of incompleteness.
Okay, thank you.
Paul?
Just a very productive conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Carl?
Nope, that's it.
Dustin?
I think that's enough now.
Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Bazan, parting, anything parting?
I will send you my 5-minute summary as soon as I get home.
Okay, very good.
You'll need that too.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night.
Okay.
Believe it or not, we still have a new business item. MB1, CATA local operating and capital match shares. Adam.
Yes, I will try to move through this quickly. We received a March 18th letter from Lawana Oliva. Wow. It must be getting
It's after
late.
10:30.
It's after 10:30. With respect to 3 distinct items here, and I am here tonight to gather council feedback, input on these items. The first of which has to do with the scheduled increase in municipal shares. You'll remember that last year, in the midst of the pandemic, we reached a consensus agreement amongst all the participating municipalities that helped fund CATA as part of our local municipal shares to agree to a 5% increase in those shares, because we do have to ramp up to hit a funding plateau or a funding level of municipal share contributions in order to leverage the dollars that are available to CATA. So last year we had agreed to a 5% increase. It's being recommended again this year that we have a like 5% increase. The municipal managers did meet with CATA staff, and by the way, we do have Kimberly Frigola here from CATA, who did not stick around for the wireless communications facilities discussion, but is here to provide any clarity or correct any mistakes that I'm making as I'm delivering this. But the managers did meet with CATA staff, had the conversation. Consensus of the municipal managers in the center region was that the 5% again for the fiscal year 2023 is appropriate. So that is something that I want to get feedback from council on. There are 2 other items that were discussed, one of which has to do with revisiting the CATA funding formula. You may recall, and Mike has pointed out to me, that it was about 5 years ago that we made revisions to what was then known as the Miller formula, and we simplified the CATA formula to include bus stops,
I'm just
population,
testing
and
service miles.
service miles. Thank you. Wow. Okay. So from the Miller formula, that was a multiple character element equation to basically 3 standard elements. But the industry has changed, and that in 2017, the model, the funding formula that we arrived at, really no longer captures all the different things that are occurring within the industry. For example, the introduction, the advent of microtransit has factored in, and there's really no way at the moment that the formula in any way adequately captures the microtransit component. So this would be the CATA Go type service that's provided. So there is a need, or CATA is suggesting that there is a need for a revisit of the CATA formula. So I'm here to get feedback from College Township Council on that particular issue. And the final item here has to do with formally removing the CATA process, the annual CATA process, budgetary process, from the COG budgetary process. Years ago, when things were simpler, even though we were using the Miller formula, it was convenient for the Center Region municipalities to deal with CATA as part of the annual COG budget process. And while I understand from Mr. Frank and others that it has been less prominent in recent years, there is still articles of agreement that basically capture that. And I'm sorry. There are COG articles of agreement that essentially capture that process. And the idea here is the time has come to separate the CATA process and the CATA budgetary process from the COG process, primarily because there are more than Center Region municipalities that are now contributing and participating in CATA services. And as a result, certain areas of the broader Center Region community or the broader Center County community that receive CATA services, such as Bellefonte or Spring Township, really are not involved in the COG budgetary process in any way. So I think the request here is for consideration or a movement toward formally eliminating CATA from that concept of a COG budgetary process. So those are the three items that were very quickly that were captured in the March 18th letter from CATA that I just wanted to get a little bit of feedback from those of you that may have a position or maybe any questions that you may have relative to the letter that we received. Sorry, it's late.
Paul, start us out, please.
Sure. First of all, I think we were already expecting the 5% increase, so that's kind of a no-brainer. The second one makes perfect sense to revisit the formulas. My only question is given the sort of variation, isn't it always going to kind of be a look back, like to capture the number of rides with a CATA-Go, sort of you're in arrears almost in a sense? I mean, is that kind of the way we're envisioning it? And it doesn't have to be answered tonight, but, it would just seem to be a challenge to look forward given the sort of variability to capture in that. But I am supportive of it. And then, personally, I think anything that could simplify and more accurately, streamline the process, I would be in favor of. So hopefully that was a quick comment from me.
Thank you. Carla?
Ditto.
That was even simpler.
That was. She had me do the lift on that.
Yeah.
I did, thanks.
Yeah.
Well done. Dustin?
Question, is the 5% increase utilizing the current formula?
Yes, the current formula.
Okay. So that's basically population increases, things like that, okay. It just seems interesting that it's 5% upon 5%, so is it really the formula, or is it 5% factoring in, hey, we have this buffer in the CATA-Go and things like that, right?
No, I don't think that's the case, and I would be happy to point to either of the people that have more familiarity with CATA than I do. Kimberly.
Local match is not tied to our budget at all. It is, we receive a certain amount of state funding, and the legislation is written that in order to receive that, we are to contribute 15% of that amount, which is way more, because historically, our agency has been underfunded. So there's, in the legislation, a cap written in. So you can't go up more than 5% per year until you reach that 15% you should be paying. So that's all it is. It has nothing to do with service or budget or anything. It's how, the state tells us how much money they're giving, and until we get to 15%, ours goes up 5% per year. And then the former Miller formula and now CATA formula is simply how the participating entities, of which there are currently, well, there's 8 now, 8 municipalities in Penn State. It's just how it's split up among you.
Or not, the CATA formula only splits up the Center Region municipalities. Like the Benner and Penn State, those are contractual, correct?
No, so they come off the top, and then they're part of the formula. So there's the total amount that PennDOT tells us, Penn State comes off, the contracted municipalities, and then the others are calculated based on those factors. But it's part of the formula to remove them first, so,
Yes.
kinda?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
kinda.
Technical.
Yeah,
I like it.
kinda, but not. But yeah, and because the other part of it is if you look at, if you broke it down by some of the contractuals aren't equal paying the dollar for dollar per mile and all that kind of stuff as the other ones are. But get it, we want them participating in it and everything like that. And anything more they do helps us in the end. I got a little familiarity with the CATA formula as well.
Right, but so item 1 is basically us approving, the 5% increase.
Something we knew was happening.
That we knew was happening.
Yeah, for 2022, do we have the details of that? I mean, I'm just looking at a pretty simple table here that says, hey, pay 5% more.
Have you not had your CATA tour?
Yeah. Well, and then one of the great things that CATA does is for our budgets, their look back or their presentation of it actually looks back further than they were required per se, just so that they can get us a number that we can figure into our budget. It's actually behind, it lags our budget.
Yeah,
We'd be-
it's what Paul.
We'd be happy to go through the whole thing and provide whatever you would like. Essentially,
I just want the base
5%,
data, how we
yeah.
calculate this number, that's it.
The 5%, instead of running the formula for the past couple of years, the 5% is presented just because those factors like, route miles and, like population's pretty stable, the number of stops is pretty stable, but route miles, things have just not been running.
Yeah, I just want to see it.
You'd love the Miller formula, huh?
Yeah, the purpose for this evening was conceptual. I don't have the actual, we can generate the actual number.
Yeah.
So that will not be a problem, but it's just was more or less proof of concept, continuation of what we had been doing, coming out of COVID, those kinds of things.
At the time you're asked to approve paying it, there's a resolution and everything. That's a separate visit that'll come later.
Okay. And then item 2, as Adam pointed out, that's the relooking of the formula, right? Agree with that. And then the third item is,
Removing
the college budget process, agree. Okay, no further questions.
Okay. Eric? Not making you go last.
Yeah. No, I think the answer to your question is, as I read the memo, we're just agreeing to 5% regardless of what service changes occur, just because there's so many variables at play right now and so many different things. Chances are, if we ran the formula, we'd go up about 5% anyways, because the whole pot goes up 5%. So the additional 5% has got to come from somewhere. So this just divvies it up evenly across all the participating municipalities. In the past, when you run the formula, one township might go up 4, one might go up 6, this just eliminates that, makes it easier to move forward. We can budget a number, they can budget a number. So to me, number one's an easy decision, particularly for us. Number 2 is, geez, where was that 30 years ago? No matter what formula you choose, there is not going to be a 1-to-1 ratio between service received and local dollars put in. And I'll just give you a quick example, because this is, according to timeline, has to move forward pretty quickly. Each municipality values what they get out of CATA. CATA offers a bunch of different benefits. And you can talk to 5 different municipalities, and you may get 5 different answers as to what's the most value. You talk to one municipality, like the borough, and they don't care if anybody in the borough rides. It's worth their contribution purely for traffic mitigation. To keep all of those cars from creating total gridlock downtown. On the other end of the spectrum, you go out to Spring Township, they joined the authority for one simple reason, so that their residents would have access to CATA ride. Okay? So their local share was simply to access cattle. Neither one of those two things are in the Miller formula or in the CATA formula. So my point is that the farther you get away from tying value of your municipality to specific elements of CATA service, the better off you are. Because unless you include them all and you quantify them somehow, you're never going to get to where the purists think you should be. And then you throw in the example that we're dealing with here right now, is the industry's changing. So as soon as you figure out all those values, tie it to it, now you got microtransit that you got to factor into. So in my opinion, the best Miller CATA formula is population, or something that's just kind of static out there, because everybody has access to all of those services and each carry different values to different people. And as far as number 3 goes, why couldn't we have gotten the finance committee out of the deal 30 years ago? No offense.
No. I actually have a comment.
You're right, for all the reasons that Adam said.
Yep.
CATA has gone way beyond just those municipalities.
Absolutely.
And the worst case scenario is you get the finance committee to finally agree on something, and then you go to Bellefonte and they say no.
Sure.
Well, guess what? We're coming back to the finance committee and we're figuring out how to divide a bigger pot of money up, because you still need that same minimum local share, so.
Well, the other part is COG isn't funding it. The individual municipalities are funding it, so why? But I have comments on that, but.
So those are that's long answer, 3 long
Yep.
yeses. Yes,
Yep.
yes, and yes.
Yep. Paul?
No, that was it. I already said mine.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. So, it was like an hour ago. Yes. The only thing, maybe I'm having a senior moment, but when we implemented the CATA formula, we took CATA out of the finance committee. And you've come directly to the municipalities since then. Matter of fact, at our reorganization meeting, when you look, the only place that it shows up on in the CATA Articles of Agreement is under the Finance Committee. And actually in that, it's stricken in our reorg meeting.
And even with it there, all it says is something like,
Exactly.
present the budget. So
Right,
like-
and so the intent, one of the things that we said out of the CATA formula was, what are we doing? We're not gonna approve, we're not gonna approve the money or anything like that. But I think the point being that if we do an Articles of Agreement revision, that clearly should come out.
Yeah, well,
Or could you point to something where we're forcing you to go through COG now?
no. So the last official action that the general forum took was that it came back to the finance committee through COG, anytime that there is a formula change or to set the plan for a number of years of capital contribution. So that's what would be removed at this point. Those 2 things were remaining. As far as the COG bylaws, I don't really see it as, I think what it says doesn't matter. All it says is present the budget. It has nothing at all to do with local match and what we're talking about here and shares and all that. Right now, we have our budget out there. We send it to everyone for public comment. The budget's presented.
So you're saying the first time was a baby step, COG wanted like just a little, they just weren't ready to give up all control and information, and now this is cutting the strings.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the motivation or not, but that's the step that was taken.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're right, I put motivation into it.
Yeah, it's to review and present the annual Center Area Transportation Authority budget to the general forum. Again, that's not really, I think it was done out of convenience, but as part of the adoption of the CATA formula, no, because the general forum doesn't approve the individual items and stuff.
And it actually creates confusion because the 2 are it.
Absolutely,
was
that was
paid by
why
the
we,
municipalities
that,
as they were
yep,
relevant to the.
Especially with
budget.
new elected officials who
Yep.
have enough to deal with, and now they think that that's.
correct.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything about approving or anything, it's just.
Because it doesn't have the authority to
I like
approve
it separated in my head, it's so much nicer.
Yeah. So, okay, all right.
That's all that I needed was input, and I've got 3 yeses, or I've got 5 yeses on each of 3 questions, so I'll be able to communicate that back, and that satisfies what we needed to accomplish this
Have you
evening.
been to any other municipalities on this subject yet?
There's a lot of things going on. There's the new service plan, there's some people that are still trying to invite us to talk about the budget. So
I just
I'm
wondered
gonna
if you got.
say we've been invited to all 5 member municipalities, but this is the only one for the reason we asked for in the letter.
So no one
Great
has chimed in yet,
Market leader.
these 3.
Yeah,
No one's
there you go.
provided 3 yeses on this yet.
We've not gotten that feedback. Perhaps those conversations will take place when we actually go visit, but it's not how the ask has come to us.
Well, just tell them to refer to our discussion if they have any questions.
Yeah.
Well, frankly, we took advantage of your previous presentation to make sure that you knew that we were going to be having this conversation, so.
And
That works for me
purposely
as
kept
well.
you up past your bedtime.
Oh my gosh, I'm done at 9:30. I am not good at staying up late.
Yep.
Carla was done at
Neither are we.
8:45.
Yeah,
I
she
did-
was
I-
counting down for then.
I did not do well tonight.
All right, Adam, you have everything you need on this item?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right,
Thank you.
great. Staff informatives, is there anything
There
in
wasn't
those
any.
that staff wants to bring to our attention?
There wasn't any.
I didn't see
Then
that.
the answer would be no. Council staff, other matters, anybody got anything? Okay,
Still make 11.
I'm on Bernier time. I will accept the motion for adjournment.
So moved.
I'll second, we are adjourned.
Just
Thank
out
you.
of spite, I would have liked to seen it go past 11 o'clock.
I wasn't gonna let it happen.